Part 33. The Rebirth of Space, the Lucky Girl from a Farm Family. Author, He Would Fire Every. Chapter 321. Chapter 321 Something Strange. Ruan Chu nodded, I hope. Before Ruan Chu finished speaking, there was a knock on the door. King Qin raised his voice and said, Come in. Shopkeeper Miao pushed open the door and came in. He first bowed to King Qin and then bowed his hands to Ruan Chu. Your Majesty, we have some clues about Huang Jinhao's matter. King Qin put down the cup in his hand, looked up at shopkeeper Miao, pointed to the chair next to him, and said, Sit down and talk. Shopkeeper Miao thanked him, sat down as he was told, and continued, Lao Xiao got an account book from Huang Jinhao last night, which contains many detailed records. Lao Xiao, Xiao Jingsong is a top-notch qigong and is responsible for intelligence collection in Chang'an restaurant. Shopkeeper Huang presented the account books to the King of Qin. King Qin reached out to take it and started reading it. Shopkeeper Huang said, This book records the incoming and outgoing accounts of the silt removal and repair work on the upper river when King Qi was supervising the Ministry of Industry 5 years ago. The total amount of silver that passed through his hands was 300,000 taels, but the silver taels used for river repairs were insufficient. 110,000 taels, of which there is a deficit of 190,000 taels. King Qin looked through it roughly, and then asked, Has it been checked by the accounting office? Shopkeeper Huang nodded, Yes, please check it with Mr. Liu. King Qin closed the account books, put the account books on his lap, and touched the turned-up corners on the edge of the account books with his hands, trying to smooth them out. Apart from this, have you found out anything else? King Qin didn't stop moving his hands, and asked while stroking the corner of the paper. Suddenly, King Qin's hand stopped and he picked up the account book and looked at it carefully. Shopkeeper Miao was about to reply when he saw King Qin's expression. His eyes fell on King Qin's hand and asked, Your Majesty, what's the matter? King Qin opened the cover of the book and looked at it carefully. Give me an embroidery needle. Shopkeeper Miao turned around and went out. After a while, he came in with a sewing box. King Qin took the embroidery needle and fiddled with it gently. After a while, King Qin took out a small note from the cover. Shopkeeper Miao and Ruan Chu were both stunned. Shopkeeper Miao asked unexpectedly, What is this? The King of Qin opened the note and found the official's name and the amount of silver written on it in small regular script. After reading it, King Qin handed the note to Ruan Chu. It should be a list of people who have accepted bribes. After reading it, Ruan Chu handed the note to shopkeeper Miao. How does the prince plan to deal with it? King Qin thought for a while and said, Don't alert the enemy first, let people secretly check the people on the list. Also, if Huang Jinhao is investigated carefully, his evidence of guilt should be far more than this. Shopkeeper Miao bowed and said, Yes, I understand. Just as King Qin was about to order the food to be served, there was an urgent knock on the door, and all three of them were stunned. King Qin raised his voice and said, Come in. Shopkeeper Miao Leng also came in and reported, Your Majesty, General, Shopkeeper, Huang Jinhao, who was looking for trouble that day, came with Manager Wei who was with King Qi. After hearing this, Shopkeeper Miao said, I know, the person who comes here is a guest, so he just needs to be treated well. Len Yi leaned forward and said, Manager Wei asked for the shopkeeper's past by name, and he looked very unkind. He said he wanted to find shopkeeper Miao to get an explanation for what happened that day. Are you asking for an explanation? What explanation are you asking for? King Qin asked. Len Yi shook his head and said, My lord, I don't even know. Shopkeeper Miao said to King Qin, Your Majesty, please go and have a look. King Qin nodded, Okay, let's go. After shopkeeper Miao left, Ruan Chu raised his voice and shouted towards the door, Xia Shan, come along and have a look and find out what's going on. Xiaoshan raised his voice and replied, yes, I understand. After a while, Len Yi brought someone to the private room to pass the dishes. Ruan Chu said, shopkeeper Miao is a careful person. He is busy handling things himself, but he still doesn't forget to take care of the prince. King Qin nodded and said, he has always been careful. Come, let's eat. Ruan Chu served half a bowl of soup to King Qin. King Qin said, you can eat too, don't worry about me. I'm used to doing it myself. Ruan Chu smiled and said, of all the gentlemen, I am afraid that the prince is the least pretentious. King Qin lowered his head to take a sip of the soup, raised his head and said, I grew up in an ordinary family, so it's not surprising that I would do this. King Chen is also very easygoing. Well, I saw it at the banquet that day. The two of them chatted about home affairs while eating. Not long after, Xiaoshan came back and reported, Your Majesty, General, Huang Jinhao brought Wei Tian to find shopkeeper Miao, and asked shopkeeper Miao to hand over the woman who beat Huang Jinhao that day. They said that the woman who beat the person must be pretending to be Princess Yan Ran. Princess Yan Ran is gentle and well-behaved, how could she do such a cruel thing? They also said that shopkeeper Miao knew someone was impersonating Princess Yan Ran but did not stop him, and was suspected of shielding the attacker. A group of people clamored for an explanation from shopkeeper Miao. King Qin frowned when he heard this. Ruan Chu said, Your Majesty, what does King Qi mean? What is his purpose? He wants to use shopkeeper Miao to confess the princess. The princess listens to him, so he sells the princess a favor, but the princess does not listen to him. Yes, just to ruin the princess's reputation. Xiaoshan said, looking at the way they are messing around, it seems that this is their purpose. By the way, Wei Tian said, the Huang family has been a single generation for several generations, and Huang Jinhao has no male descendants, but he was beaten to death by that woman. This means that the Huang family has no descendants. Chang'an restaurant allowed such a cruel woman to commit murder, and afterwards turned a blind eye to the perpetrator, turning a blind eye to the perpetrator and letting it go. Chang'an restaurant should bear the main responsibility. Ruan Chu's eyes widened when he heard this, and he asked, Princess, did you beat the person named Huang? Isn't Princess a little too tough? King Qin said calmly, that's what Huang deserves. He dared to tease Xiao, but Xiao didn't take his life, which is considered very polite to him. Ruan Chuji asked in shock, did the princess really beat up the person named Huang? I regret not being there that day and missing a big play. Xiaoshan, you stay with the prince, and I'll go see what the person named Huang looks like. Don't worry, Your Majesty, I won't show up, I will just take a sneak peek. After saying that, Ruan Chu stood up and walked out. King Qin shook his head and continued to eat with his head down. Soon, Ruan Chu came back and asked, Your Majesty, does the princess know martial arts? King Qin nodded, yes. I have the opportunity to discuss with the princess. King Qin asked, what's going on with them? Ruan Chu replied, Wei Tian wants shopkeeper Miao to hand over the person who beat the person, otherwise, they will report it to the official. Shopkeeper Miao said that it was getting late now and the people from the Yamen dismissed the office and asked them to go directly to the Yamen tomorrow. He is still pulling it apart now, and Wei Tian seems to have a headache. King Qin lowered his lips and said, he thought that by resisting King Qi's banner, shopkeeper Miao would be frightened and would obey him obediently. Ruan Chu asked in confusion, the princess already announced her family name when she beat someone up, why bother to say to herself that someone is pretending to be the princess? King Qi just didn't think about it. The princess was not grateful to him for his behavior. King Qin sneered and said, King Qi must want to gain a sense of presence in front of Xiao. Ruan Chu seemed to understand. He pursed his lips and smiled and said, he is not afraid that he will not find a good impression, and the princess will give him a double look in vain. King Qin pursed his lips and said, "Eat quickly, the mutton won't taste good when it's cold." After Ruan Chu thanked him, he took his chopsticks and started eating. Rugjuan came in and reported, "Sir, the people who went to Wutong Lane came back and said that the princess has not returned yet, so she went to Lujiazhuang with Mr. Li to eat roasted whole lamb." King Qin said, "I understand, go to shopkeeper Miao and ask him to deal with the matter quickly, and then come to see me." The king of Qi asked Wei Tian to come forward to handle the matter, indicating that he did not know that the Chang'an restaurant was under the name of the king of Qin. The king of Qin asked Rugjuan to ask questions on his behalf, that is, to tell Wei Tian that shopkeeper Miao was his. Sure enough, not long after Rugjuan left, Wei Tian took Huang Jinhao away. Shopkeeper Miao sent Wei Tian and his party away and returned to the private room. Ruan Chu asked, "They didn't make things difficult for you, did they?" Shopkeeper Miao said, "He wanted to embarrass himself, and he was coaxing him at first. Then when he saw Rugjuan, Wei Tian suddenly became a little panicked and said, 'It's getting late, so he should go back. If something happens, we'll see him another day.'" Discussion, and then left with the people. Rugjuan smiled and said, "The little fox is pretending to be powerful." King Qin said, "Be more cautious in the future to prevent the Huang family from retaliating. Over Xiao's side, arrange for 2 secret guards to follow." After King Qin finished explaining to the manager of Miao, he turned to Ruan Chu. Ruan Chu leaned over and said, "Okay, I'll make arrangements later." At the Prime Minister's mansion, Mrs. Shangguan was looking at the head and face that Wang Piyun had brought back, and said with satisfaction, "Although the palace will arrange the crown and harem for your wedding, my grandmother still has to prepare the best for you." Wang Piyun leaned against Mrs. Shangguan and said coquettishly, "Thank you, Grandma. Yunar knows that Grandma loves Yunar the most." Mrs. Shangguan raised her hand and patted Wang Piyun's hand, and said, "It's good that you know. Once you get married, you can serve the prince. You have to be more ambitious and strive to give birth to Linar for the virtuous king as soon as possible. In this way, you will have a firm foothold in the palace. Grandma and Grandpa will naturally worry about the rest for you." Wang Piyun blushed and replied, "Thank you, Grandma. Yunar has memorized all her teachings." "Old Madam, shopkeeper Wang Er from Baoking Silver Building on Bai's Hang Road would like to see you." Wang Piyun's heart skipped a beat when he heard about the second shopkeeper on Bai's Hang Road, and he looked at Mrs. Shangguan in panic. Mrs. Shangguan's eyes fell on the servant and she did not notice Wang Piyun's panic. "Please come in." After shopkeeper Wang Er entered the room to receive the gift, he leaned forward and said, "Old Madam, there are many people in the shop, holding jewelry in their hands and asking for return." "Return? Okay, why do you want to return the product? Is there anything wrong with the product?" Mrs. Wang asked. Wang Piyun was so frightened that he lowered his head when he heard that someone was returning the goods. Shopkeeper Wang Er looked up at Wang Piyun and said nothing. Just when Mrs. Shangguan was about to urge her, a servant came in and said, "Madam, shopkeeper Fang Er from Baoking Silver Building on Jinshui Road would like to see you." Another second shopkeeper came. Mrs. Shangguan had a bad feeling in her heart and said with a stern face, "Please come in." Fang Er, the shopkeeper of Baoking Silver Building on Jinshui Road, came in and met Li. He cupped his hands and said, "Old Madam, half an hour ago, people were coming to the shop to return goods with items." Mrs. Shangguan frowned and asked, "Is this also a return?" Shopkeeper Fang Er replied, "Yes, it is also a return. I don't know what went wrong with the small one. Everyone who comes to the door asks for a return." Before Madame Shangguan could reply, the servants hurried in again. Without waiting for the servant to speak, Mrs. Shangguan asked, "Which shop is this?" The servant leaned back and said, "Madam, this is the shopkeeper Chin Er from Ma Sing Street." Mrs. Shangguan said angrily, "Please come in." The servants exit. After shopkeeper Chin Er walked in the door and saw shopkeeper Wang Er and Fang Er, his panic suddenly calmed down. Based on intuition, shopkeeper Chin Er guessed that the shop on Bai's Hang Road and the shop on Jinshui Road must have encountered the same situation. Maybe it's the mentality of punishing others without blaming others, or maybe it's because even if you are scolded, someone will accompany you, so you won't panic. The second shopkeeper Chin bowed to Madame Shangguan. The old lady Shangguan asked, "Why are you here?" Subconsciously, Mrs. Shangguan hoped that this was not about returning goods. Shopkeeper Chin Er leaned forward and said, "Back to Madam, it's like this. Half an hour ago, someone came to the door with something and asked to leave. The shopkeeper thought that only a few people were dissatisfied, so he started to return the goods to the customers. Unexpectedly, before the refund was completed, someone else came to ask for a return. Later, more and more people came to ask for a return. The shopkeeper noticed that something was wrong and quickly sent the young lady over to ask the old lady for advice. Even though Mrs. Shangguan had gone through the storm and faced the sudden large-scale returns, she still felt panicked. Mrs. Shangguan pinched her hands hard and tried to calm herself down. "How many people were waiting to return goods when you came?" Shopkeeper Chin Er leaned forward and said, "Go back to me, madam. When I arrived, there were already about 30 people waiting in the shop." Shopkeeper Fang Er leaned forward and said, "Back to madam, when I arrived, there were about 20 people in the shop." Shopkeeper Wang Er said, "Bai's Hang Road is about the same as Maxing Street. There are about 30 people. This was the situation when I came here. It is unknown whether there has been an increase now." Mrs. Kui was extremely frightened and silently thought to herself that her daughter's wedding was just around the corner, so don't let anything happen. These days, she reads scriptures and prays for blessings every day, hoping that everything will be safe and sound until her daughter gets married smoothly. But the more worried and scared people are, the more trouble comes to them. 2 days ago, Mrs. Yang was murdered, and then there was trouble in her shop. Mrs. Kui said, "The goods have been sold, can I still return them?" Shopkeeper Chin Er said, "The rules in our shop are that if customers are dissatisfied, they can come and withdraw." "What kind of rule is this? I've been wearing a hairpin for a long time and I'm tired of it. You can also say I'm not satisfied with it. Can I bring it to my door and ask for a replacement?" Shopkeeper Fang Er said, "The rules of the shop are that if the customer is not satisfied with anything sold by the shop within 3 months, as long as the goods are in good condition, they can return them at the same price. We have been doing business for decades and have never encountered anything like this. Yes, it happened suddenly, we don't know where the problem went, so why did so many people return goods all at once? This is something very strange." Shopkeeper Chin Er didn't finish his words. The servant came in and said, "Old madam, shopkeeper Lu Er from Sanjing Road in the east of the city wants to see you." End of this chapter. The Rebirth of Space, the lucky girl from a farm family. Author, He Would Fire Every. Chapter 322. Chapter 322, Thousands of Clues. Mrs. Shangguan realized the seriousness of the situation, her face became solemn, she turned to Mother Yang and said, "Let someone go and see if the Prime Minister has come back. If he doesn't come back, send someone to look for him." Mother Yang hurried out. As Mrs. Shangguan expected, shopkeeper Lu Er from the east of the city came in and still wanted to return the goods. Mrs. Kui said to Mrs. Shangguan, "Mom, this is so abnormal. Why do so many people suddenly come to return goods? There must be someone behind the scenes. Let's quickly ask Manager Qian to check and see where the problem lies." Mrs. Shangguan was so panicked that she had no idea. After listening to Mrs. Kui's words, she turned to the servant and said, "Call the money manager to come in." The mother-in-law hurriedly bent her knees and walked quickly to the front yard. Wang Piyun looked at the mother-in-law who was leaving in a hurry. Her already uneasy heart became even more frightened, and she began to feel in a trance. She wanted to tell her what happened today, but she was afraid that she would be punished by her grandmother if she told her. Mrs. Kui saw her daughter in a daze and said, "Yunur. Sister Yun. Sister Yun, what are you thinking about?" Mrs. Kui raised her hand and took Wang Piyun's hand. Wang Piyun came back to his senses and said, "I'm sorry, I was distracted just now. Why did I call Yunur?" Mrs. Kui looked at Wang Piyun and said worriedly, "Yunur, your face looks ugly. Are you feeling uncomfortable somewhere?" Wang Piyun glanced at Mrs. Shangguan in panic, shook his head and denied, "No, Yunur doesn't feel uncomfortable at all." Mrs. Kui looked at her uneasy daughter and said, "Something happened at home. You can't help by sitting here. Go back to your yard." Mrs. Kui's words were exactly what Wang Piyun wanted. Wang Piyun quickly bowed and said, "Okay." Wang Piyun was just about to say goodbye to Shangguan's old lady, but saw Wang Xiang step into the room with a sullen face. Everyone in the room stood up to greet him. Wang Xiang walked to sit down next to Mrs. Shangguan and asked, "What happened?" The Prime Minister sat down and began to ask questions. The Prime Minister went back to the government office, and as soon as he stepped into the courtyard, the woman in the backyard came to look for him in a panic, saying that something serious had happened and asked him to come to the backyard immediately. Wang Piyun did not dare to interrupt the Prime Minister's question, so he had to sit down again. Mrs. Shangguan briefly told the Prime Minister about the returns from various shops. At this time, Steward Qian entered the room and bowed to the Prime Minister and Mrs. Shangguan, who were sitting at the top. Then he asked, "Old madam, what's the matter with Sun Xiao?" Mrs. Shangguan ordered, "Manager Qian, hurry up and send someone to find out what happened at the Silver Building. Chief Qian must be ordered to stand down." Shopkeeper Lu Er took a step forward and said, "Master, madam, the shop is still waiting for a reply. The customer's patience is limited. If the customer doesn't get a response for a long time, I'm afraid there will be trouble." Mrs. Shangguan looked at the Prime Minister and asked, "Mr. Prime Minister, what do you think?" Wang Xiang held his chin and thought for a while, then looked up at the second shopkeepers in the room and said, "You go back first and arrange for people to return the goods. The people who handle the returns should be slower and check carefully to see if the goods are damaged, and waste time longer. It was almost dark when it was time to apply, and then I told the guest that it was dark today and the light was not good, so I could not continue to process the return. If you wanted to return, you would have to come back tomorrow. Find a way to put off today and give yourself time to find out the truth." After hearing what the Prime Minister said, the second shopkeepers felt reassured and immediately bowed to say goodbye. Wang Xiang was afraid that the second shopkeepers would not understand what he meant, so he warned him bluntly, "Remember, you must have a good attitude. When you talk to people, your tone of voice must be soft and slow. Remember, don't shout or say harsh words to others, using foul language. Let people prepare some fruit refreshments for those who return goods. Do you understand?" The shopkeepers have been dealing with customers all year round and pondering the psychology of customers all day long. When Wang Xiang spoke his words, they understood what Wang Xiang meant. "Don't worry, Mr. Xiang, I understand." The Prime Minister nodded, "Go ahead and remember to endure the humiliation and bear the burden. A man must be able to bend and stretch." The second shopkeepers bowed their hands and said, "Young ones, I would like to listen to the instructions of the Prime Minister." They went back to their shops to get busy. After the shopkeepers left, Wang Xiang asked, "Why did this happen suddenly?" Mrs. Shangguan raised her hand to her forehead and sighed heavily, "I don't know, but when several shopkeepers came over, I was looking at the head and face that Sister Yun had brought back with my family and Sister Yun. When Shang Guan said this, he suddenly thought of something and turned to look at Wang Piyun. How could it be such a coincidence? Sister Yun went to the bank to return the goods, could it be? Mrs. Kui's heart suddenly sank when she saw Mrs. Shang Guan looking at Wang Piyun. He stuttered and asked, "Mother, this is..." Mrs. Shang Guan ignored Mrs. Kui's question and asked directly, "Sister Yun, tell Grandma honestly, what did you do in the shop today?" Mrs. Shang Guan's eyes fell on Wang Piyun. Wang Piyun felt like lightning chasing after her in a thunderstorm, and her hands were shaking with nervousness. Mrs. Kui saw her daughter's trembling look and knew that today's incident must have something to do with her daughter. In front of her father-in-law and mother-in-law, whose fallen leaves can recognize autumn, Sister Yun can only be forgiven by confessing. Mrs. Kui said warmly, "Yun'er, Grandma is asking you something. Please tell your grandpa and grandma exactly what happened to you today." Wang Piyun was trembling with fear and looked at Mrs. Kui for help. Anyang. Mrs. Kui gave Wang Piyun an encouraging look, "Don't panic, just tell the truth about what you experienced." Wang Piyun secretly glanced at Wang Xiang and saw that Wang Xiang was looking at her, so she quickly lowered her head. Seeing that Wang Piyun had not spoken for a long time, Mrs. Shang Guan was as anxious as a cat scratching her head, so she urged, "What happened? Are you talking?" Wang Piyun was about to speak, but Mrs. Shang Guan urged her to speak. The words that came to her lips were frightened away, and she lowered her head and began to cry. The Prime Minister looked at Wang Piyun, sighed slightly, and asked, "Where is Qing Fang? Are you going out with Sister Yun today?" Wang Piyun's maid Qing Fang hurriedly stood up, bent her knees and said, returning to the Prime Minister, "This servant is going out with the young lady today." Wang Xiang said, "Tell me, who did Sister Yun meet today? What did she say? Please tell me exactly what she said." Qing Fang bent her knees and responded, "Yes, miss, I will take a break today and take my slave to Baoking Silver Building on Bai's Hang Road to get noodles." Qing Fang has a very strong retelling ability. She almost retells the dialogue between Piyun He, Li Tao and Gu Huayu according to the original words. Mrs. Shang Guan was very angry when she heard this, and said to Wang Piyun, "You girl, you always turn my words into deaf ears. How did I tell you before? I told you not to provoke Nazai before your wedding. Why can't you listen? That Nazai was born without her parents and lacked education. Tell me, you usually look like a pretty spirited person, why can't you figure it out? If you argue with a poorly educated person, what good can you do? It really me off." The Prime Minister looked at Wang Piyun, turned around and comforted Mrs. Shang Guan, "You need to teach your child slowly, and don't be impatient." Mrs. Shang Guan patted her chest, took the tea handed over by Wang Xiang, lowered her head and took a few sips to suppress the anger in her heart. Then he said, "It is said that a person gains wisdom after being exposed to a pit. You can do the math for yourself. How many times have you fallen into the hands of Nazai? Why don't you have a long memory? You have suffered over and over again, but you don't know how to avoid her, and you take the initiative to provoke her. Are you stupid?" Wang Piyun lowered his head, and the old lady who was appointed Shang Guan was gone. She only raised her hands to wipe her tears from time to time. The old lady Shang Guan got angrier as she scolded her. Wang Xiang saw that her fingers were trembling with excitement and advised her, "Drink some tea to calm down." Mrs. Shang Guan waved her hand to express that she did not want to drink tea anymore, but she stopped and did not continue to scold Wang Piyun. She leaned back and took a deep breath to calm down her emotions. Wang Xiang said to Wang Piyun, "Don't cry. Go back and copy the women's instructions 10 times. Don't step out of Xiaoxiang garden before the wedding." Wang Piyun leaned forward and said, Thank you, Grandpa. Yuner will follow your grandfather's teachings. Wang Xiang waved his hand, please step back. Wang Piyun went to the Prime Minister, and Mrs. Shangguan said goodbye and left with Jing Fang. At the door, she met the manager Qian who came into the house. When manager Qian saw Wang Piyun coming out, he stepped aside and said, Miss Third. Wang Piyun nodded towards manager Qian and walked away. Manager Qian waited for Wang Piyun and the maid behind her to come out of the door before stepping into the house. When Wang Xiang saw manager Qian coming in, he said first, no need to pay homage, tell me, what's going on? Manager Qian leaned forward and said, the cause of the matter was the quarrel between the third lady and Princess Yan Ran. The third lady ridiculed Princess Yan Ran because she was poor and couldn't afford the honor. Princess Yan Ran came out of Baoking Silver House and went directly to Fulong Silver House. In a fit of anger, she bought more than 2,000 pieces of jewelry from Fulong Silver House. At the time of the incident, there were many customers at Baoking Silver House and Fulong Silver House. The incident immediately went viral, spreading rapidly from 1 to 10, and from one to another. Later, it was said that the Xiaodong family of Baoking Silver Tower was domineering and arrogant. Why Baoking Silver Tower does not keep its word, raises the price on the ground, and makes all kinds of excuses. One of the most widely circulated words is Miss San's statement that Baoking Silver Tower is the most popular in the whole capital, and no one dares to call it the first. These words offended other Yinlu and caused public outrage. Sunan Silver House and Han Cai Yin House were the first to announce that as long as those who return goods at Baoking Silver House can go to their shop with the return receipt and choose any jewelry worth 10 taels of silver. Now Fulong Yinlu, Yuan Yitang Yinlu, Yujin Yinlu, and Yumanlu Yinlu are all saying the same thing. Mrs. Kui's face turned pale, she clenched the handkerchief tightly, and looked at the Prime Minister and Mrs. Shangguan uneasily. I hope that the king can come up with a solution that has both ends, otherwise, my daughter's reputation will be ruined. Mrs. Shangguan turned to look at Mrs. Kui and said, did you see it? How many times have I told you? When you go out, you must always remember your identity and be careful in your words and deeds. How about you guys giving me the time to ramble? How about this? You know how powerful it is, right? Mrs. Kui leaned forward and said, my mother taught you rightly. Please think of something to do. Otherwise, Yuner's reputation will be ruined. Mrs. Shangguan glanced at Mrs. Kui, I usually discipline Yuner more harshly, but you feel heartbroken. What happened now? Do you know that reputation is important? Mrs. Kui lowered her head and did not dare to say a word. The Prime Minister said, okay, it's useless to talk about this now. Mrs. Shangguan said, it's useless but you still need to let them know how powerful it is, otherwise, they will never have a long memory. Go and make it clear to Sister Yun that she has caused so much trouble just because she is willful and unobtrusive. Old Madame Shangguan stared at Madame Kui and gave orders. Mrs. Kui bowed and said, yes, my wife will come over right away. After Mrs. Kui left with the maid and the mother-in-law, Mrs. Shangguan glanced at Aunt Yang, who took the maid and the mother-in-law out of the house knowingly. After the maid and mother-in-law had retreated, Mrs. Shangguan asked, Master, look, this matter has caused a storm in the city and everyone knows about it. How can we calm down this matter? The Prime Minister leaned back in his chair, sighed heavily, and said, in a short period of time, this matter can be spread all over the city. How many hands are behind it? Mrs. Shangguan looked at the Prime Minister nervously, what does the Prime Minister mean? The Prime Minister sighed heavily, and after a moment he said, the backyard and the front hall and the court hall are inextricably linked. When you get to a position like ours, there are thousands of pairs of eyes staring at you behind you. Sister Yun's accident was both accidental and inevitable. Teach what needs to be taught well, as long as you know it well. Mrs. Shangguan nodded, yes, I understand. Who will take action on this matter? King Qin or King Qi? What is their purpose? The king pressed his temples and said, both the king of Qin and the king of Qi are possible. The purpose? It's just to pull me down from the position. Remove the left and right arms of the wise king, break the wings of the wise king. Let them ascend to the throne. Clear the way. Mrs. Shangguan said quietly, I am in bad health and failed to educate my children and grandchildren well, which is holding back the Prime Minister. Prime Minister Wang comforted him and said, don't blame yourself, you have done a good enough job. You don't have to worry about this matter. Let me handle it. Yunur, you still need to put some thought into it. With her current temperament, even if she marries into Prince Yen's palace, she will cause trouble for Prince Yen. You must let her understand that a truly powerful person is not just a quick talker. The fast tongue is just the behavior of the reckless husband. A truly powerful person is one who knows how to restrain himself. Mrs. Shangguan nodded, I understand. I'm worried that this will bring trouble to the Prime Minister. Trouble has already come, and worrying can't solve the problem, right? Take care of yourself and let me take care of the backyard, so that I can handle the affairs in the front hall with peace of mind. The British government has been experiencing constant troubles recently, and the Queen is in a very bad mood recently. If you have some free time, go to the palace to talk to the Queen. Mrs. Shangguan understood that the king was asking her to enter the palace and give the message to Concubine Da, so that Concubine Da would understand the current situation and not blame Sister Yun for the fault. Mrs. Shangguan nodded and said, I understand. Prime Minister Wang stood up and said, you have to rest first. I'm going to the outer courtyard to take care of business. You don't have to wait for me tonight. I may have to rest in the outer courtyard today. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Rebirth of Space, The Lucky Girl from a Farm Family. Author, He Would Fire Every. Chapter 323. Chapter 323 The Fuse. When King Qin returned to the palace, Rumo stepped forward and raised the curtain, waiting for King Qin to get out of the car. The King of Qin saw Ru Yan's face looking happy and asked, do you have faith? Rumo replied with raised eyebrows, yeah, yes, I have the letter. King Qin walked towards Shaihua Pavilion and said as he walked, let's go to the study to talk. Okay, Ruja followed King Qin and Ruan Chu to Shaihua Pavilion. After entering the study, he offered tea and left. King Qin asked, what letter? Rug leaned forward and said, the news that the princess bought the jewelry from Fulong Silver House on Bai's Hang Road spread like a frying pan. When I left, there was already a long queue of people waiting to return the goods at Baoking Silver House on Bai's Hang Road. King Qin was leaning on the back of his chair. After hearing what Rumo said, he immediately straightened his body, stared at Rumo and asked in surprise, is someone arranging returns? Ru Yan replied, yes, it's not just the Bai's Hang Road family who are returning goods. When I saw that there were people returning goods on Bai's Hang Road, I sent people to look elsewhere. As a result, people were queuing up to return the goods at the Baoking Silver Building on Jinshui Road and Mahang Street. I asked someone to check and found that by the time of application, people were queuing up to return the goods at the 10 branches of the Baoking Silver Building in Beijing. King Qin and Ruan Chu looked at each other. Ruan Chu said, is there someone behind this? King Qin nodded, it should be. Ruan Chu sighed with emotion, it seems that there are many people staring at the Prime Minister Wang's mansion. I'm afraid Miss Wang San's reputation will be ruined. King Qin thought for a moment and asked, apart from this, is there anything else? Ru Yan looked at King Qin blankly, others. What are you referring to? King Qin reminded, From the quarrel between Xiao and Miss Wang San to the large-scale return of goods, surely a lot of things happened. For example, why do these people want to return goods? What are the benefits of returning goods? Who organizes these people to return goods? How do they get people to return goods, and why do they do it? After hearing this, Ryu Jin woke up from a dream, clapped his head repeatedly and said, "I'm careless, I just want to be happy," so I hurried back to report the news. "I'm going to find out now." Speaking, Ruhan bowed to say goodbye, took 2 steps back and turned around to leave. Li Tao sent Gu Huayu to Wutong Lane. Gu Huayu asked, "Would you like to go in for a cup of tea?" Li Tao shook his head, "No, I will come early on the first day of the new year." Gu Huayu responded with a smile, "Okay. Thank you for today." Li Tao said, "Thank you for what?" "I promised to give you a gift, but it ended up like this." "You're treating me today as a gift. His roasted whole lamb is delicious and I like it very much," Gu Huayu said. Li Tao laughed and said, "You are such a foodie. There are many delicious places in the capital. I will take you there another day." Gu Huayu responded readily, "Then I'll thank you first." Li Tao nodded and said, "Go in and see you for the first time." Gu Huayu nodded, waved to Li Tao, turned around and entered the house. Li Tao watched Gu Huayu enter the house, then turned and left. Quanzi immediately led him over. Li Tao took the reins from Quanzi and asked, "How did things go?" Quanzi leaned forward and said, "Following my instructions, spread the news as quickly as possible." Sunan Yinlu was the first to respond. "Those who return goods to Baoking Silver House can go to any shop in Sunan Silver House to pick up any jewelry worth 10 taels of silver with the return receipt." After the news about Sunan Yinlu was released, Han Ke Yinlu also followed suit. Later, Yuan Yitang, Yujin Yinlu, and Yuminlu all posted notices. After hearing this, Li Tao frowned slightly and asked, "Have you checked? Whose shop is Hankaian building, Yuan Yitang and Yumin building?" Quanzi leaned forward and said, "Master Hui, I've checked. Yuan Yitang is the dowry of Yeshan from Qingqiu Palace. Yuminlu is the property of Princess Jinglian. Kaiyinlu didn't find out, Yujin Yinlu is still there, didn't have time to find out." Li Tao nodded, "Okay, as long as it can ruin Wang Piyun's reputation." Li Tao got on his horse and disappeared into the night. When Gu Huayu returned to the house, Wang Qin stepped out from behind the pillars, bowed to greet her, and asked, "Princess, are you planning to open a silver building when you come back with so many jewelry?" Gu Huayu looked at Gu Wang guiltily, shook her head and said, "No. At that time, my temper was rising, and I only thought about how to vent my anger, and didn't think much about anything else." Wang Qin looked at Gu Huayu speechlessly. "When we first entered the capital, the princess asked everyone to keep a low profile. Now it's better. The reputation of the princess spending a lot of money has spread in the capital. Now, everyone in the capital is I know the princess is a rich man. Just know it, it's not a big deal. I know that the princess has Huayu Pavilion and half-day leisure in her name. Whether it is Huayu Pavilion or half-day leisure, the business is doing well. Coupled with the reward the emperor once gave to the princess can still afford this amount of money now." Sui-er said as he walked over here, with King Zhu following behind him. Wang Qin looked at Sui-er and said, "That being said, it is always better to keep a low profile. If word of what happened today spreads, how many eyes will be on the princess in the future? For the princess, it will do more harm than good." Gu Huayu knew that Wang Qin was doing it for her own good, so she didn't argue with her. She just said apologetically, "Yes, it's my fault today, I was too impulsive. Actually, I could have just laughed it off calmly. But when I looked at Miss Wang San's arrogant face, the anger in my heart surged upwards, and my emotions took over my mood. So, I was impulsive. Aunt Wang, I'm sorry, I promise I won't do this again next time." As he said that, Gu Huayu blessed Wang Qin. Wang Qin was so frightened that she stepped aside and said, "Princess, princess, you are going to kill me." Gu Huayu lowered her head to admit her mistake, and Wang Qin immediately stopped. "Why are you standing here?" "Hello, Princess." Han Shi came back from outside. Sui Er looked at Han Shi and asked, "Did you find out the news?" Han Shi nodded, "I found some, let's go into the room and talk in detail." They went to the study room. Gu Huayu looked at Han Shi and asked, "What news did Uncle Han find out?" Han Shi said, "The princess's attack today can be said to have caused thousands of waves to rise with one stone." Wang Qin asked curiously, "One layer creates 1,000 waves? How do you say that?" Han Shi looked at Wang Qin and replied, "On the surface, the princess's move is just a fight with Miss Wang, but it kills several birds with one stone. Why can't I understand? Didn't the princess act impulsively? Did she do it intentionally?" Wang Qin looked at Han Shi and then at Gu Huayu. Gu Huayu hurriedly said, "No, I just wanted to vent my anger, poke Wang Peiyun's arrogant momentum, and create some trouble for Mrs. Shangguan. I really didn't think much about anything else." "What news did Uncle Han find out?" Han Shi took a sip of tea and said, "The princess asked Lonisera to come to the bank to look for Sui Er, and the younger one happened to be at the bank. After hearing Ling Dong's message, Xiao Xiao and Sui Er guessed that the princess wanted to make a big deal out of the matter. Hence, Xiao Xiao and Sui Er went their separate ways. Sui Er took the banknotes to Fulong Silver House. The younger one sent people to various places to spread the news. Our people mainly went to tea houses and restaurants. The younger one came out of the restaurant and was going to look for Sui Er on Bai's Hang Road. When passing by Yalan Road, he saw a notice posted by Sunan Silver House. The notice said that as long as those who go to Baoking Silver Building to return the goods can go to Sunan Silver Building to receive jewelry worth 10 taels of silver with the return voucher. You can choose any jewelry worth 10 taels of silver? Is there any enmity between Sunan Silver House and Baoking Silver House? Gu Huayu asked in surprise. Han Shi shook his head, "I don't know, I haven't found out yet." Not only Sunan Yinlu, but also Hankei Yinlu also issued the same notice. There are also Yujin, Yuan Yitang, and Yumantang who also issued the same notices one after another. Wang Qin said, "How bad is Baoking Yinlu? A little thing makes everyone tear his family apart." Gu Huayu thought for a moment and said, "When things have developed to this point, it is no longer just a dispute between merchants." Sui Er nodded, "The princess is worried that this matter may have been involved in a factional dispute in the court." Wang Gu looked at Sui Er in astonishment, then at Gu Huayu, and said in disbelief, "The quarrel between two little girls has turned into a factional fight in the court in just one afternoon. Aren't you a bit alarmist?" Han Shi breathed out heavily, "The princess's concerns are reasonable, and this is not alarmist. The situation has developed to this point, which shows that someone has been eyeing the Wang Xiongfu and trying to bring him down." Wang Qin said, "Even if someone is looking at the Prime Minister Wang's mansion, this incident will at most damage the reputation of Miss Wang San and the reputation of Baoking Silver House." Planning for the worst, Baoking Silver House's business plummeted from then on, and it eventually closed down. This is just a matter of losing some money. How can it bring down the Wang Xiongfu? Sui Er nodded, "On the surface, it seems so." "Princess, what do you think about this?" Gu Huayu frowned and thought for a while, then said, "This matter has developed too fast today, completely beyond my expectations. In addition to us, there are several forces pushing this matter forward." Han Shi agreed and said, "That's it? Apart from us, there are several forces controlling this matter." Gu Huayu said quietly, "So, my fuse led to several thunders." Sui Er looked at Han Shi and asked, "Who is the owner behind Sunan Silver Tower?" Han Shi shook his head, "I've asked Zhengzhen to inquire about it. I should have a letter later." Gu Huayu said, in addition to Sunan Yinlu, Hangzhen Yinlu, Yuan Yitang, Yujin Yinlu, and Yuman Tang, let people check to see whose property they are and which party they are backed by. Han Shi bowed his head and responded, yes, I understand. Wang Qin said, as soon as this incident came out, the relationship between the princess and the prime minister's mansion was forged. Gu Huayu corrected, the relationship between me and Liang Ziyi from the prime minister Wang's mansion started when Mrs. Shangguan sent someone to assassinate Lulu. We threw Miao Ershui and the 5 of them at the gate of the prime minister Wang's mansion, and Mrs. Shangguan hated me to the core. Wang Qin said, did the princess do that? Gu Huayu nodded and said, so, today's matter is just to bring the disagreement between us and the Prime Minister Wang's mansion to light. Wang Qin said, from now on, the princess will not be able to leave her side day and night. Let Lonicera, Begonia, and Pear Blossom be by her side. Gu Huayu shook her head, take them with you when you go out. You don't need them to follow you when you return to the house. It's enough for me to have Qingya guarding my yard. For matters in the house, it's enough to have Lonicera. I don't like people following me. Seeing her resolute attitude, Wang Qin knew that talking was useless, so she had to compromise, okay, be sure to take Begonia and Liwa with you when you go out. Sui Er said, in addition to Haitang and Liwa, I will arrange 2 more secret guards to follow. Gu Huayu wanted to say no, but seeing several people's serious expressions, in order to reassure them, she did not refuse. Gu Huayu said, calculating the time, Uncle Hua can arrive in the capital the day after tomorrow at the latest. Aunt Wang will make some preparations. Let's hold a reception banquet for Uncle Hua. Wang Qin nodded in agreement, this is easy, princess, don't worry. Gu Huayu continued, today, I took my grandmother and aunt to visit the old house. We agreed to move on the 10th day of the lunar month and went to the old house to pay homage to my father and mother. Aunt Wang will go over and take a look in the next 2 days. If anything is short, please repair it quickly. Superior. Wang Qin bowed and said, okay, I understand. Gu Huayu looked at King Zhu and asked, how is your house? King Zhu raised his hand and scratched his head, and replied with some embarrassment, thank you for your concern, princess. Everything is ready. Wang Qin smiled and said, don't worry, princess. I went to check today. The house in Qingzhou is short of a mistress, Miss Biao. Everything else is ready. Gu Huayu smiled and nodded, Aunt Wang also has to worry about Xiaoshuang's dowry. Han Shi smiled and said, Wang Qin has to worry about not only marrying, but also marrying. Sui Er smiled and took over the words, those who are able work harder. There is no way. None of us have ever been married and have no experience. We can't help even if we want to. Gu Huayu leaned against the table, raised her chin with her hands, and asked with a smile, second Uncle Su, do you have a girl you like? If so, I will ask Aunt Wang to take care of it for you. Han Shi asked, Sui Er, do you have a girl you like? Su Erlao blushed, raised his hand and punched Han Shi, stop making noises. Gu Huayu said seriously, Uncle Han, don't laugh at Uncle Su. Uncle Han also thinks about it. You are all grown up now. If you have any idea, marry your housewife as soon as possible. If you have any of the maids you like in the house, tell me, and I will talk to them. If both parties are satisfied, then I will do it for you. Of course, if you don't like someone from the palace or you like a girl from outside, we can invite a matchmaker to come to propose marriage. Sui Er shook his head, I have never thought about this. Gu Huayu interrupted him, then start thinking about it from now on. Sui Er thought for a while and said, thank you, princess, please think about it. Gu Huayu looked at Han Shi and said, Uncle Han also wants to think about it. Han Shi nodded, okay, think about it. Gu Huayu looked at Wang Qin and said, Aunt Wang also wants to think about it. Wang Qin said, they are young and men. It is enough for them to get married. I am already an old woman, so what else do I want to think about? For the rest of my life, I will follow the princess. When the princess gets married, I will be the dowry. I will follow the princess to her husband's house and work as the princess's steward. Gu Huayu suddenly realized that she still didn't know Wang Qin's age and asked, Aunt Wang, how old are you? Han Shi blurted out, she is the same age as me, and she is 38 this year. End of this chapter. The Rebirth of Space, the lucky girl from a farm family. Author, He Would Fire Every. Chapter 324. Chapter 324 Investigation. Gu Huayu said, if you are not even 40, how can you be old? Han Shi nodded in agreement, that's right, where are you old? 38, most women of my age are now grandmothers, still not old, Wang Qin said. In my opinion, you are just like a 15 or 16-year-old girl, Han Shi blurted out. Gu Huayu raised her head to look at Han Shi and saw that his eyes were extremely gentle. Her heart moved and she couldn't help but think in that direction. Of course, Gu Huayu doesn't think Wang Qin is old. That's because she has lived in modern times for more than 20 years. In modern times, countless people start a family in their 30s and 40s. Hua Jinlin has not been married for more than 30 years and has become a famous diamond king. She was also in her early 30s before she traveled back through time, but she didn't feel how old she was. Not only does Han Shi not think Wang Qin is old, but in his heart, Wang Qin is still a girl of 15 or 16 years old, with gentle eyes, which is quite appropriate. Wang Qin glanced at Han Shi and replied, you are 15 or 16 years old. You have a lot of white hair. You are still 15 or 16 years old. What you say will make people laugh. Don't say that. In our minds, you are still 15 or 16 years old. Sui Er, right. After saying that, Han Shi pulled Sui Er's sleeve and raised his chin towards him, motioning for him to help. Sui Er glanced at his sleeves, then at Wang Qin, and said, huh? Right? But I've never seen Aunt Wang look like she was 15 or 16 years old. When Wang Qin was 15 or 16 years old, Sui Er was only 2 or 3 years old. Wang Qin had been in Jiangnan while Sui Er was in the capital. Sui Er's truthfulness caused Han Shi to kick him. Sui Er smiled and took a step to the side, deftly avoiding Han Shi's attack. Gu Huayu looked at the way Han Shi bared his teeth at Su and couldn't help but smile and said, Uncle Han is right. In our hearts, Aunt Wang is just like a girl of 15 or 16, young, beautiful and full of energy. Han Shi looked at Gu Huayu gratefully and said, the princess knows people best. The princess said you are young. You are really young. Wang Qin spread his hands and said, thank you. Actually, it doesn't matter to me whether you are young or not. Before I found the princess, I stayed by Mr. Zhu's side. At that time, I thought that after 100 years of Mr. Zhu, I would travel around the world like my master and be a chivalrous man who eliminates evil and helps the weak. Later I found the princess, and I abided by the rules of the Lunjing people, stayed with the princess, and guarded the princess for the rest of my life. Han Shi said, you are right. It is our blessing to be able to find the princess and keep her for the rest of our lives. We should cherish our blessing. Gu Huayu watched as the light in Han Shi's eyes dimmed little by little, and the guess in her heart got the answer. Smiled and replied, being able to have you by my side is a blessing left to me by my father and mother. I hope this blessing can last longer. Does Aunt Wang understand what I mean? Without waiting for Wang Qin to reply, Qing Yu came in and reported, Princess, Zhengzhen is back. Everyone looked towards the door. Zhengzhen entered the room and greeted Gu Huayu first, then bowed his hands to everyone. Han Shi asked, have you found out? Who is the owner of Sunan Silver House? Zhengzhen leaned forward and said, I found out that the owner of Sunan Silver House is named Sujins, whose ancestral home is Yangzhou. Sunan Silver House is a century-old store in Jiangnan. However, it has only been open in the capital for 20 years. Have you been operating in the capital for only 20 years? Sui-er asked in surprise. Zhengzhen nodded and said, yes, it has only been in business in the capital for 20 years. Han Shi held his chin thoughtfully and murmured, Sunan Silver Building has been in the capital for 20 years, so it's no wonder whose property Baoking Silver Building belongs to. Since he knows that Baoking Silver Tower is the property of Wang Xiangfu, and Wang Xiangfu and Xian Wangfu are related by marriage. The Prime Minister's mansion is not only a high-power Prime Minister's office, but also a relative of the Emperor. What is the origin of Sunan Silver Tower? Dare to confront Wang Xiangfu. Gu Huayu looked at Zhengzhen and asked, who is this Sujins? Have you found out? Zhengzhen shook his head and said, I only found out that the Su family lives in Qingquan Lane in the south of the city. The Su family doesn't seem to have many relatives in the capital, and they rarely interact with people around them. Few neighbors know about the Su family's situation. Sui-er's brows knitted when he heard this. It's very abnormal to have been alone for 20 years without interacting with others. Gu Huayu nodded, it's indeed abnormal. Let's check again. Start with the clerks in the shop or the merchants with whom we have business dealings. If we dig deeper into the people who are related, we will definitely find out the information. Zhengzhen bowed and responded, yes, I understand. I'll check it out tomorrow. Han Shi asked, where are the other companies? Have you found anything? Zhengzhen replied, the owner of Han Kaiyan House is Han Dongsheng. The Han family has been doing business for generations. Their business involves wine shops and inns, grain, oil, rice and noodles, silk and satin cloth shops, gold and silver antiques. It can be said that they have everything. By the way, the Han family is an imperial businessman and is very close to the Qi Palace. Sui-er looked at Gu Huayu, Princess. This. Gu Huayu did not answer, and then asked, where are Yuan Yitang, Yujin Yinlu, and Yumintang? Have you found out? Zhengzhen nodded, Yuan Yitang is MRS's dowry, and Yumintang is Princess Jinglian's property. We haven't found out about Yujin Yinlu yet. This is the general situation. Gu Huayu sat back, leaned her head on the back of the chair, pursed her lips, and said apologetically, I was still careless. Originally, I just wanted to teach MRS Shangguan a lesson, but I didn't expect such a big battle would arise. Now I owe a lot of favors. Gu Huayu is most afraid of owing a debt of favor, and is extremely upset at this moment. Wang Qin said with relief, Princess, you don't have to mind. The favor we owe this time will be repaid in the future. Gu Huayu sighed and said angrily, oh, this is the only way. After finishing speaking, Gu Huayu looked at Zhengzhen and warned, continue to investigate the Sunan Silver House tomorrow. Zhengzhen leaned forward and said, yes, I understand. Gu Huayu looked at the hourglass and said, it's getting late today. Let's take a rest early. By the way, Uncle Han will take people to greet Uncle Hua tomorrow. Han Shi bowed his head and responded, yes, I understand. Gu Huayu stood up and prepared to go back to her yard. She took 2 steps and turned to look at Qingyu, get a more normal carriage tomorrow. After what happened today, it is not easy to go out. Qingyu understood and said, okay, I understand. The morning court was over the next day, and King Qin was about to leave with all the officials. A young chamberlain came over and said, Your Majesty, long live your invitation. King Qin looked towards the direction where the emperor left and saw Uniqlin nodding towards him. The king of Qin said to the young chamberlain, Okay, I understand. The emperor has a habit of drinking only half a bowl of bird's nest porridge when he gets up in the morning. After the morning court, he has breakfast in the side hall. The king of Qin walked up to the side hall. As he walked, the the king of Qin thought about why the emperor kept him. When he arrived at the side hall, the king of Qin went to the emperor to pay homage to him. The emperor said, "I'll give you a seat." Eunuch Gao was about to bring the brocade stool over. King Qin thanked him and sat down on the brocade stool. At this time, the palace maid came in with breakfast, and the emperor said, "Have breakfast with me." The king of Qin thanked him again. After breakfast, the emperor asked, "Is everything going well with the Ministry of Punishment? Are there any clues?" King Qin leaned forward and said, "Back to my father, the Ministry of Punishment is fine. Zhang Shangshu takes good care of my son. I have read the files from that year in the past 2 days, but I haven't found any new clues." The emperor asked, "Check slowly, don't be in a hurry. Have you gone to see Mrs. Yang at the British Duke's mansion?" King Qin raised his head and looked at the emperor. "Back to my father, my son, and I went with Zhang Shangshu and the others on the day of the incident. When Urchin, Zhang Shangshu and his entourage arrived, Dr. Su and Dr. Hu were still treating the old lady, and concubine De and the King Xian were also there." The son heard what Su Yizheng said about the old lady's injury. After King Qin finished speaking, he saw that the emperor was looking at him and asked, "Father, don't you suspect that your son and ministers did it?" The emperor said, "Of course I believe you. Some people have wrong minds, so you have to be aware of it. In the past 2 days, there have been rumors that are not good for you, so you need to pay more attention." The king of Qin leaned forward and said, "Thank you, father, I will take note of it." "Your Majesty, several prime ministers are already waiting." Eunuch Gao came in and reported. The emperor nodded and said to King Qin, "I am keeping you here today because I want you to have breakfast with me. I have nothing else to do. You can go and do your work." The king of Qin stood up to say goodbye. Coming out of the palace, from a distance, King Qin saw Rugjuan standing on tiptoe and looking in. His steps were a little faster. When Rugjuan saw King Qin coming out, he breathed a heavy sigh of relief. He turned to Ruhin and said, "Master is out, please drive the chariot over." When King Qin walked to the door, Ruhin had already driven his chariot over. Rugjuan stepped forward and lifted the curtain, and King Qin went straight into the carriage. "My father left me down to have breakfast with him, so I came out late." Rugjuan said, "Seeing that I haven't come out for a long time, I guessed that the emperor's general stayed behind." King Qin thought of his father's words and asked, "Have you heard any rumors about me in the past 2 days?" Rugjuan has been with King Qin for the past 2 days. He didn't know what King Qin didn't know, so he turned to look at Rufu and said, "Your Majesty, I want to ask you something." Rug replied, "Yes, it came out from nowhere starting from the afternoon of the day before yesterday. It said that the old lady of the British government was injured, and it was at the hands of my subordinates. This letter started to be circulated in tea houses and restaurants at noon yesterday. Before the news about me spread, the story of the princess buying up the bank came out. The matter of the princess overshadowed the previous rumors. At first, I was thinking of reporting this matter to my father, but later I was busy inquiring about various bank houses and forgot about this matter." Rugjuan asked, "Did the rumors about me spread from the British Duke's palace or the Prince Xian's palace?" King Qin twitched his lips and asked, "Is there any difference between the British Duke's palace and the Xian Prince's palace?" Rugjuan said, "Yes, the British Duke's palace and the Prince Xian's palace are originally from the same family." Ru Yan said while driving the car, "Sir, we found some clues at the Sun and Silver building." King Qin raised the curtain and saw that the car had turned onto the street where the Xingbu Yamen was located. "Go to the Yamen first, and we will talk about it later." Ru Yan responded, "Okay, I understand." King Qin asked, "Has the shop been packed?" Rugjuan replied, "Master, the shop has only made some minor changes and has been tidied up. After we have all the people in the next 2 days, we can open it. Shopkeeper Miao wants all new people to be employed in this shop." King Qin thought for a while, nodded and said, "Okay, then we will use all new people. How long will it take for our Yuan to arrive in the capital?" Rugjuan replied, "Counting the days, if there is no delay on the way, we should arrive in these 2 days." King Qin said, "Then let's wait until our Yuan arrives." Yan stopped the car, got out of the car and set up the footstool. "Sir, we're here." After King Qin got out of the car, he said, "Stop the car and come to the study to meet me." Yan bowed and responded, "Yes, I understand, little one." King Qin went to his room and met Li Cheng on the corridor, who was about to go out. After greeting each other, King Qin asked, "Are you going out?" Li Cheng leaned forward and said, "Yes, the old lady of the British government has regained consciousness. I have been sent by Zhang Shangshu to go to the British government to ask about the situation that day." King Qin nodded, "Thank you for your hard work. You have time to come over for tea when you get back." Li Cheng wanted to say goodbye. King Qin entered the study. After a while, there was a knock on the door. King Qin raised his voice and said, "Come in." King Qin thought it was Rumo, but he didn't expect that it was Yeminghao and Ruan Chu who came in. He asked in surprise, "Why are you two here together?" Ruan Chu smiled and said, "I happened to meet Sci-fi at the door, so we came in together." King Qin looked at Yeminghao and asked, "Aren't you preparing for the wedding at home? Why are you here today? Is there something going on in the house? Is my aunt not well?" Yeminghao shook his head, "Don't worry, Your Majesty, everything is fine in the mansion, and my aunt has been doing well these past 2 days. She goes to the Buddhist hall with her to copy scriptures every day, and then walks around the mansion with her, so she feels quite calm." King Qin asked, "Then what are you doing here?" Yeminghao touched his nose and said uncomfortably, "What? I just felt a little flustered after staying in the house. I didn't know what to do, so I went out and walked around, and then I ended up here. So I came in to see the prince." King Qin asked in confusion, "I'm about to marry the girl I've longed for, shouldn't I be overjoyed? Why are you still flustered?" Yeminghao shook his head, "I can't explain clearly. I'm both looking forward to it and fearful, I'm both happy and anxious." King Qin stopped Yeminghao's words, "Come on, you don't need to elaborate on your feelings with me and Xiniang. We are not married, we have not experienced what you said, and we cannot understand your happiness." Yeminghao smiled and said, "Grandma asked me to come over and talk to the prince. I asked my grandmother why she said this. Grandma also said that the prince has been smart since he was a child, so he naturally understands what it means." King Qin was too lazy to pay attention to him and turned to look at Ruan Chu. "Didn't Xiniang go to meet General Ruan?" Ruan Chu said, "My father sent someone back to the house to deliver a message and told him not to go and greet him. I have nothing to do at home, so I came here to look for the prince." Ruman knocked on the door and came in. He saw Ruan Chu and Yeminghao there, and he held his hands in greeting. King Qin said, "Tell me about the situation of the Sunan Silver Tower." Rug leaned forward and said, "The owner of Sunan Silver House is called Sujins, who is from Yangzhou. The Su family runs the Silver House in Yangzhou. Sunan Yinlu is quite famous in Jiangnan and is a century-old store. 20 years ago, Sunan Yinlu opened its first store in Beijing. Today, Sunan Yinlu has opened 4 stores in Beijing." King Qin thought for a while and asked, "How old is Sujins? Where does he live in the capital? Who do you usually interact with? Who else is there in the house?" End of this chapter. The Rebirth of Space, the lucky girl from a farm family. Author, He Would Fire Every. Chapter 325. Chapter 325 Su Tuzi. Ru Yan continued, "Su's house is in Qingquan Lane in the south of the city. Sujins is in his early 60s. He is not sociable and lives a simple life. He usually likes to have breakfast at Luyi Shengjian restaurant on Panjin Road in the south of the city. Sujins rarely goes out except for going to the pancake shop or visiting various shops. After hearing this, Ye Minghao said, "Weird. This character is a bit withdrawn. Shouldn't a business person be a well-rounded person who is good at dancing? How can he do business with his character?" Ruan Chu nodded in agreement. Such a personality would hardly work in a business world where you need to deal with people, or in a military camp where you only need to take care of yourself. The king of Qin didn't care about Sujin's character. He wanted to know why he took action in the situation like yesterday. There is too much weirdness in this. Sujin's is withdrawn and not sociable. Shouldn't he stay out of the matter regardless of his own concerns? Why did he involve himself in this storm and push himself to the top of the wave? Furthermore, Sunan Yinlu was the first to issue the notice. Why did his letter come so quickly? Did someone deliver the letter to him, or was it from one of his own? If someone delivers a letter to him, who is this person? If his people got the letter, who did his people target? Baoking Silver House or Xiao? In an instant, questions popped up in King Qin's mind. King Qin asked, "Who else is there in the Su family?" It was related to Xiao's safety. He had to find out this person clearly. Ru Yan continued, "The Su mansion is a second courtyard, not big. In addition to Sujins and his wife, there are 2 maids, 3 rough ladies, 2 servants, and a cook." Ye Minghao asked in surprise, "Only a husband and wife? No children?" Ru Jin nodded. It is said that Sujins and his wife had a daughter, but she died 20 years ago. Some said she hanged herself, others said she drank poisoned wine, and some said she committed suicide. There are different opinions. He died by suicide anyway. Ruan Chu put down the cup and asked, "Did he die 20 years ago?" Rug replied, "Yes, 20 years ago. That was the year when the Su family first arrived in the capital." King Qin and Ruan Chu exchanged quick glances. This family is not simple in every aspect. Ye Minghao nodded thoughtfully and said, "This Su family has a story?" King Qin nodded in agreement and said, "Go and find out what happened to the Su family 20 years ago. Also, why did the daughter of the Su family commit suicide?" Ru Yan bowed and responded, "Yes, I understand, little one." Rumo exits the house. Ruan Chu said, "I didn't expect that the princess's unintentional act yesterday would lead to so many things." Ye Minghao sighed. The seemingly peaceful capital has actually been undercurrent for a long time. Ruan Chu nodded, turned to look at King Qin, and asked, "Your Majesty, what should we do next?" King Qin thought for a while, narrowed his eyes slightly, and said slowly, "The focus is still on investigating the case from that year. Investigating the case is the top priority. If the case is not solved, Xiao cannot be married back home." King Qin suddenly thought of Huang Jinhao, and turned to Ye Minghao and said, "By the way, Sci-fi will go find Huanzi later and ask him to check the details of the amount of silver allocated by the Ministry of Household Affairs to the Ministry of Works in the past 5 years." Ye Minghao asked curiously, "Why does the prince care about the Ministry of Works?" King Qin briefly explained the matter, and finally said, "Huang Jinhao can make so much money, you can imagine the problems involved." Ye Minghao understood and bowed in response, "Yes, I'll go right now." Having something to do, Ye Minghao immediately stood up and said goodbye, took 2 steps, turned to look at Ruan Chu, and said, "Ziniang, you must be my guest at my wedding." Ruan Chu bowed and said, "That's my honor." Ye Minghao cupped his hands and said, "Thank you." Not long after Ye Minghao left, there was another knock on the door. "Come in." As soon as the king of Qin finished speaking, he saw Rumo go away and come back again. Seeing Ryujin's anxious expression, King Qin put down the cup in his hand and asked, "What's the matter?" Ryu Yan took a deep breath, calmed down, and said, "Sir, an informant from the British Duke's palace came to report. The old lady said that the chamberlain who came to the mansion to deliver the message that day was from the Prince of Qin's palace. Ruan Chu placed the cup heavily on the table. Is she trying to frame her? Can't she speak? Ru Yan said, although the old lady cannot speak, she can nod and shake her head, and her ears can still hear. My lord, what should I do? King Qin said, why are you panicking? We didn't do it, so why are you afraid that she will be framed? She thinks that the Jingzhou Palace and the Ministry of Punishment are just decorations. Ruan Chu said, however, this will have an impact on the prince's reputation. King Qin said nonchalantly, they like to play this game, and I will play with them. As long as the British government can bear the consequences. I know about this, you go and do your business, don't worry. Ruan Chu looked at King Qin and asked, is this the idea of the wise king? King Qin said, it should be that the wise king knows in his heart that doing this will not do anything to me. His purpose is just to ruin my reputation. Secondly, he wants to strike first so that I can't do anything to Mrs. Yang. The evidence of the crime that once persecuted me was revealed. Ruan Chu said, he must have made a good calculation. Master, the princess has arrived at the shop. Rugjuan came in to report. Ruan Chu stood up and said, my lord, you are busy. This place is not far from the Ministry of War. I will go over and pay a visit to Minister Lu. Lu Guangliang, the minister of the Ministry of War, was Ruan Chu's superior. King Qin nodded, okay, let's see you later. After Ruan Chu left, King Qin went to the shop. When King Qin entered the backyard, Gu Huayu was lying on the second floor window looking down. Qinjian. Here. King Qin looked up and saw Gu Huayu waving to him. King Qin smiled and replied, wait for me, I will come up right away. Gu Huayu watched King Qin walking towards the stairs and said to Lonicera, wait here and put the food on the table. After saying that, Gu Huayu quickly walked out of the door, ran into the room in the compartment, and hid herself. Gu Huayu turned sideways and paid attention to the movement outside the door, listening to King Qin's footsteps walking from far to near, until the footsteps passed by the door, then she quickly rushed out of the room and jumped on King Qin. King Qin smelled the familiar scent, smiled and put his arm around Gu Huayu. Gu Huayu reached out to cover King Qin's eyes, and asked with a sweet smile, guess who I am? King Qin started to make wild guesses in cooperation, and the two childish ghosts made a wild fuss for a while before Gu Huayu got off King Qin's back. Gu Huayu looked around and asked, when will the shop open? King Qin said, shopkeeper Miao suggested that we hire new people here. Yuan will bring people back. They should arrive in the next 2 days. Once the people arrive, we can start the business. Have you thought of a name? Make it a tea house, Gu Huayu asked. King Qin put his arm around Gu Huayu's shoulders and looked sideways at her, I haven't thought about it yet. Do you have any good suggestions? Gu Huayu thought for a while and said, how about Qingxiang Pavilion? King Qin muttered it twice, nodded and said, yes, it's called Qingxiang Pavilion. Gu Huayu said, there are several yamen nearby. Let's turn Qingxiang Pavilion into a leisure hall, where we can drink tea and talk about things, or order a set meal here to solve the problem of eating. Especially at noon, people from the government office went to restaurants to eat. They were in a hurry and couldn't eat well at all. Come to us and order a set meal, which can not only solve the problem of eating, but also talk about things. King Qin asked, what is the set meal? Gu Huayu gritted her teeth, secretly sighed, and pursed her lips to explain, it's a complete meal, with rice and vegetables, meat and vegetables, 1 serving. For example, the braised beef rice set is just 1 portion of braised beef, 1 portion of rice, 1 portion of vegetables, 1 portion of soup, and half a braised egg. Kung Pao chicken rice set, replace the meat dishes with Kung Pao chicken, but the rest is the same. Of course, you can also replace the rice with noodles or powder. We operate in a diversified manner to give our customers more choices. Most importantly, we need to decorate the environment in an elegant way so that people feel comfortable and will not want to leave when they come. As long as they are looking for someone to talk to, they first think of King Xiang Pavilion. King Qin said, "It's a very good idea, you little idiot, you are very talented in doing business." Gu Huayu raised her eyebrows proudly, "Of course, I'm smart." King Qin looked at Gu Huayu dotingly, nodded and said, "Okay, go back and tell shopkeeper Miao your thoughts and let shopkeeper Miao make arrangements." "Okay, I'll tell shopkeeper Miao later, let's go inside and have dinner." King Qin smiled and said, "Did you bring food here? What delicious food did you cook today?" King Qin heard that Gu Huayu had brought food, and he was inexplicably looking forward to it. Gu Huayu skipped a few steps, turned around and looked at King Qin, then walked backwards. "What do you think?" King Qin shook his head, "I can't guess." Gu Huayu said, "Braised prawns in oil, glutinous pork ribs, pine nuts and corn, stir-fried bamboo shoots, old duck soup, 4 vegetables and 1 soup, how about it?" "Very good, thank you," King Qin said with a smile. The two of them entered the house one after another. Lonisara had already put the food on the table. Gu Huayu said, "You should go and eat too." Lonisara bowed her knees and retreated. In the British government palace, Gao Tuiguan, Li Chang and the servants turned around and left Mrs. Yang's room. The British Duke, the British Crown Prince Lu Dinkan, Lu Dingning and Lu Zixun followed him out. Walking to the corridor, Lu Zixun rushed to Li Chang's side. He asked, "Young Master Li, my grandmother pointed out that the person who came to pick her up that day was from the Prince of Qin's palace. Shouldn't the Ministry of Punishment ask the Prince of Qin to come to the court for questioning?" Li Chang has always been dissatisfied with Lu Zixun's style. He has little ability, but he has a high and condescending attitude. In the past, for Lu Zixun's sake, Li Chang would give him a few points. Now that there is no need to look at Zi Qin's face, there is no need to hide the dislike for Lu Zixun in his heart. Li Chang looked at Lu Zixun and said with a half-smile, "The Ministry of Punishment handles cases according to the regulations of the Ministry of Punishment. Zixun doesn't have to worry about this." Because of the relationship with King Qi, Lu Zixun has always been hostile to Li Chang. He snorted coldly and said, "Young Master Li doesn't need to say these kind of words to me. I know that young Master Li is on good terms with the King of Qin, so I'm not surprised that you prefer the King of Qin." Li Chang was annoyed by Lu Zixun's words and interrupted him before he finished speaking. "Zixun, you have the right to question me. But before you question it, please provide evidence instead of relying on your inconclusive conjecture. Today I tell you clearly that when I do things to be worthy of the responsibilities of this official uniform and with a clear conscience. It is not your approval, Lu Zixun." Lu Zixun smiled contemptuously, "Who doesn't know how to talk big words? And young Master Li has only been in the Ministry of Punishment for a few days. It's too early to say this." Li Chang felt that he was crazy for arguing with a brainless person. Li Chang breathed out and said, "As an official of the Imperial Court and a member of the Ministry of Punishment, I will enforce the law impartially. I will not listen to partial beliefs, nor will I convict people based on just one side of the story. On the day when something happened to me, when Zhang Shangshu, Zheng Shilang, Lu Fuyan, and Gao Tui came to investigate the case, they all recorded the interviews with the people in the mansion. If I remember correctly, the concierge of your mansion and the maids and women in the old lady's courtyard all said unanimously that the chamberlain who came to pick up the old lady was from Prince Yen's mansion. These records are all evidence, not only the old lady's testimony is evidence." Lu Zixun didn't understand the law at all regarding Xin Tong. After hearing Li Chang's words, he felt a little guilty. However, he still said with an aggressive face, "What does the servant know? My grandmother is the one who suffers, and her testimony is the most important. Li Chang glanced at him, and then said, the servants in the house are inconsistent with the old lady's testimony. There must be something hidden in this. Our people will find out the whole story and let the truth come out as soon as possible. I have something to do, so I'll leave first. Zigzun looked at Li Chang's back and said loudly, the prince is guilty of breaking the law and the common people are the same. As an official of the Ministry of Punishment, Mr. Li must not protect those who break the law. Li Chang twitched the corners of his lips, turned around and smiled dryly, don't worry, Mr. Liu, I will enforce the law impartially. Considering that we have known each other for many years, framing is also a crime, especially framing the prince. The crime can be beheaded. Finished. Li Chang bowed his hands to everyone in the British palace and led the servants towards the gate. Dinkin stepped forward and said, I'll see you off. Li Chang once had respect for Lu Dinkin because of his relationship with Lu Zikin. He leaned forward and said, my lord, please stay. I can go out by myself. Dinkin continued to walk forward. Let's go, I just have to go out of the house. When Lu Dinkin's words were said, Li Chang didn't say much, slowed down his steps, let him go behind Lu Dinkin half a step, and walked towards the gate together. Zigzun has been targeting Zikin like this all these years, Lu Dinkin suddenly asked. Li Chang turned to look at Lu Dinkin, and then nodded, it's almost like this behind his back. He wouldn't dare in front of King Qin. Dinkin did not ask again. Arrived at the gate of the British Duke's mansion, Li Chang bowed his hands to Lu Dinkin and left on horseback. On the other side, Lu Zigzun watched Li Chang walk away, turned to look at the British father, and asked, you know it's useless, but you still do this. Does this make sense? The British public said expressionlessly, how could it be meaningless? Lu Zigzun said, can Lu Zikin be dismounted in this way? Cannot. Lu Zigzun said dissatisfiedly, then why bother? The British Duke glanced sideways at Lu Zigzun and said calmly, nothing can be done overnight. You need to be patient and plan it slowly. Do you understand? End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Rebirth of Space, the lucky girl from a farm family. Author, he would fire every. Chapter 326. Chapter 326 Peace of Mind. Lu Zigzun nodded as if he understood, yes, thank you Grandpa for your teaching. My grandson understands. Lu Dingning came back from sending the high-ranking official back, walked towards the British Duke, and asked with dissatisfaction, Father, we must have a big fight with the King of Qin, okay? The person who came that day was obviously not from the King of Qin's palace. Why do you say it's from Prince Qin's palace? Lu Dingning wanted to go to the Prince of Qin's palace to find work, but he didn't want his father but framed the Prince of Qin. How did he face the Prince of Qin? The British Duke glanced at Lu Dingning and said in a deep voice, what do you know? Ever since Lu Dingning lost his post as Minister of War, the British Duke looked at him with displeasure. Lu Dingning was already dissatisfied with what the British Duke had done, and when he saw the disgusting look in his eyes, he became even more resentful. He thought to himself, what do I know? What don't I understand? He said, after all, Zigzun has lived in the British government for 20 years. He is not a relative but is better than a relative. How can you be so cruel as to frame him? When the British Duke heard the word relatives, he shouted at Lu Dingning, relatives? You treat him as a relative, but he treats you as a relative. What benefit does he give you? You want to find something to do, but he can't tell? The Prince of Qin's palace has just been built and it's time to hire people. Does he remember that you have been his second uncle for 20 years and leave you a position? Or, if he becomes the King of Qin, Can he say a few words for you in front of the emperor and reinstate your position? Even if he can't reinstate you, he can find you a job. Has he done anything for you? No. Is this the relative in your mouth? You know very well that without the emperor's words, it would be more difficult for you to get a job than to climb to heaven. To the king of Qin, all this is just a matter of raising his hand. He doesn't even need to raise his hand. He only needs to speak and your errand will be settled. Did he speak for you? LV Dingning was left speechless by the British Duke's question. Lu Zixun said, that man is just a white-eyed wolf. My father has illusions about him. I can only say that there is something wrong with my father's vision of people. Yingying looked at his unfulfilled son, pointed forward, and said to Lu Zixun, follow me. Okay, my grandson will come father, it's better not to put your hopes in that white-eyed wolf, so as not to feel uncomfortable when your hopes are dashed. After saying that, Lu Zixun quickly caught up with the British Duke. The British Duke turned his head and looked at Lu Zixun, who was following him, and said angrily, that's a guy who doesn't live up to his expectations. Why are you talking to him about this? Lu Zixun sighed and said, he is the father of his grandson. As a son, we cannot just watch him being treated like a monkey. Even if he was treated like a monkey, he brought it to his door himself, Britain said angrily. Lu Zixun said, that being said, he is the father of his grandson, so he cannot ignore his grandson. The British Duke turned his head to look at Lu Zixun again, and after a while, he said, you are a filial person. Before the two of them reached Wenyuan Pavilion, a servant came over and said, my lord, the prince has come over. Which prince? Lu Zixun asked. The servant bowed and said, second master, you are a wise king. Lu Zixun looked at the British Duke, didn't the prince say that he had something to deal with today, but the government came. The British Duke shook his head and said, I don't know yet. Let's go and meet the wise king first. Speaking, the British Duke turned around and walked towards the door. Lu Zixun quickly followed, is there something wrong? The British Duke shook his head, I don't know either. Let's go. We'll find out when we meet the prince. The pace of the two of them accelerated a lot. Going to the screen wall, the carriage of the wise king has entered the house. Lu Zixun saw that the carriage of the wise king had stopped, stepped forward, lifted the curtain, and called out diligently, Your Majesty. The Xian dynasty. Lu Zixun nodded and got off the carriage. After seeing the ceremony, the British Duke asked, why is the prince here today? The wise king raised his hand and said, if something happens, let's go into the house and talk about it. The British Duke saw that the wise king had a sad face, and politely asked the wise king to go to Wenyuan Pavilion, Your Majesty, please come this way. The three of them hurried to Wenyuan Pavilion and entered the study. Du Bin served tea and consciously retreated outside the door. The British Duke asked, what happened? The wise king said, something happened in the Prime Minister's mansion. The British Duke was stunned and asked quickly, the Prime Minister's palace. The wise king nodded and told what caused a fuss yesterday afternoon. At the end, he said, this matter has caused a storm in the city, and everyone in the palace knows about it. After the court, my concubine asked someone to stop me. I had just come from my concubine. I don't know if my father knows about this. My mother and concubines already know about it. I'm afraid my father also knows about it. Lu Zixun didn't think this was a big deal, and said, you know it if you know it. How big of a deal can a little girl just pretend to be? The British father pulled his beard and walked around the room, shaking his head in disapproval and saying, when things got to the point where Princess Yanran bought out a bank out of anger, she could still be considered a little girl pretending to be angry. Now that many banks are involved, she is not just pretending. It's so simple. After speaking, the British Duke looked at the wise king and asked, have you found out? Who is the owner of these silver buildings? Which force is behind them? King Xian said, except for Sunan Yinlu, Yujin Yinlu has not been found out, but other houses have been found out. How many families are there? The British public asked. King Xian said, there are Ants, Yeshans, Jinglians, and Qi Wangs. These families publicly stood in line yesterday. Miss Wang San's words yesterday became a source of leverage for others, and today there are many more silver houses standing on the opposite side of Baoking's silver house. The British Duke thought for a while and said, anyone with a discerning eye will know that someone is manipulating this matter at a glance. The Xian Wang nodded, someone is manipulating it. Miss Wang San didn't offend a certain family, but the banking industry. In recent years, Baoking's silver house has become a dominant force in the capital, overwhelming other companies. Now that the other party seizes the opportunity, he will naturally return it fiercely. Lu Zixun said disapprovingly, at worst, we will lose some money and close the silver building. The British Duke thought for a while and said, now that things have happened, I'm afraid that the other party's purpose is more than just this. Lu Zixun asked in confusion, more than that, is it possible that the other party also wants to remove the king? The British Duke walked to the desk and sat down, sipping his tea and saying, it's very possible. Lu Zixun moved the brocade stool to the desk, can't you? The Prime Minister is our Daxing Prime Minister, and there is a wise king behind him. The British Duke put down the cup in his hand, looked at Lu Zixun and said, the silver buildings that are standing opposite the Baoking Silver Building, behind them are the Duke Chinquo's mansion, Prince Qi's mansion, and Princess Jinglian. Take any of these houses and come out. Whose family is not the royal family and the country's authority? Now that these families are together, things will not be simple. Xiang Zhuang's sword dance is intended for Pei Gong, do you understand? The other party's goal is no longer Baoking's silver tower, but the Prime Minister and the Prince. Lu Zixun asked, what should we do? Your Majesty will not marry Miss Wang San? Should you immediately sever the relationship with the Prime Minister Wang's mansion? The British Duke shook his head and said in a deep voice, what nonsense are you talking about? The marriage between the Prince and Miss Wang is a marriage granted by the Emperor. How can you say that you will not marry if you don't want to marry? Lu Zixun kept his mouth shut and did not dare to say anything. The British Duke looked at the wise king and asked, what is your plan? Why don't you meet the king first and discuss it with him? The wise king thought for a while and said, it is not easy for me to go to see the Prime Minister at this time. Please go to the king for me and ask the Prime Minister to bring out the charter and deal with the matter quickly. The British Duke nodded, okay, I'll go take a look. Lu Zixun asked, what about my grandmother's case? Should it continue? The wise king thought for a while and said, there is no time to take care of this matter now, so let's put it aside for now. Lu Zixun said, my lord, you don't have time, but I have time. You are busy with your work. Let me handle the grandmother's case. The wise king thought about the old lady's case, only to ruin the reputation of King Qin. Since Lu Zixun took the initiative to ask for the job, he simply let him do the trouble. Then he said, okay, I'll leave this matter to you. How much silver is needed, please ask for it. With the permission of the wise king, Lu Zixun was overjoyed and bowed down to accept the offer happily. Gu Huayu had dinner with King Qin, drank 2 cups of tea, and asked, do you still need to go to the Yamen this afternoon? The king of Qin thought that Li Cheng might look for him when he returned, so he told Gu Huayu about the British government affairs. Gu Huayu sneered and said, this British prince has done all the shameful things and brought shame on all the ancestors of the Lu family. Thanks to the emperor for accepting the hereditary and irreplaceable title of the British Duke, the British Duke's office has become so stinking that it no longer deserves the title of Duke's Palace. After venting her unhappiness, Gu Huayu said, it's just a bunch of clowns. You don't need to pay attention to this matter, let me deal with them. King Qin raised his eyebrows and said, okay, I will leave this matter to you. I will concentrate on investigating the case back then and try to find out the truth before the year. After the year, I will ask my father to grant us a marriage. Gu Huayu smiled and said, then let's go. You go back to the Yamen, and I'll go to the Sunan Silver building. King Qin was about to stand up when he sat down again after listening to Gu Huayu's words. Xiao wants to go to Sunan Silver Tower. Gu Huayu nodded, yes, I want to go around and see if I can meet Sujins. Why did Sunan Silver Tower end yesterday? Are they helping me, or are they having trouble with Baoking Silver House? I have to go and find out, otherwise, I won't feel at ease. King Qin said uneasily, then I will go with you. Gu Huayu shook her head, no, I'll pretend to be a customer and go up to explore the situation. I'm also very curious and want to see what's going on. Don't you know how to put on makeup? Put on one for me too. Let's pretend to be a young couple and go see it together. Gu Huayu looked at King Qin and asked, are you really going? King Qin nodded, really go. Gu Huayu shouted out the door, Lonicera Japonica. Lonicera came in, bent her knees and asked, Princess, what's the matter? Gu Huayu ordered, bring up my dressing case. Landong received the order and turned around and left the house. After a while, he came in carrying a dressing case. Gu Huayu took out the foundation to adjust the color, and began to apply it on King Qin's face. As he applied it, he said, how many women are fascinated by your face? The king of Qin opened his eyes and looked at Gu Huayu. Gu Huayu applied it just around the eyes, stopped her hand, and reminded, Qinjian, close your eyes. King Qin closed his eyes again and asked, what about you? Gu Huayu didn't understand for a moment and asked, what? King Qin asked again, are you fascinated by my face? Gu Huayu reacted and said with a smile, of course I'm fascinated. The first time Shi Cheng saw you, he was fascinated by you. King Qin raised the corners of his lips and said, at that time, I was covered in blood. How could I charm you? Gu Huayu said, the first time I saw you was at the door of a restaurant on the street in Shishan. You and Ryuan walked past me. The corners of King Qin's mouth curved even more. He liked hearing Gu Huayu talk about their encounter on the street. His impression of her was the moment he woke up and she opened the door and entered the house. To this day, he still clearly remembers the feeling when he met her eyes. She was like a long-lost old friend. The moment he saw her, he felt particularly at ease and comfortable. Gu Huayu saw the small brackets on King Qin's face and asked, what are you thinking about? King Qin opened his eyes and looked at Gu Huayu, Xiao, after we get married, how about we go back to Shishan to have a look at some time after we get married? Gu Huayu nodded, okay. King Qin stood up and kissed Gu Huayu's forehead, Xiao, you are so kind. Gu Huayu said with a smile, sit tight, I'm putting on makeup. King Qin sat down again, raised his arms around Gu Huayu's waist, closed his eyes and let Gu Huayu play with his face. He said nonchalantly, when we get married, let's go to Shishan first and live there for a few days, then go to Hongcheng, and then to Hangcheng. Wherever you have lived, I would like to live for a while. Gu Huayu smiled and said, okay, then you can take me to the place you have been. I want to see where you have been in those years. King Qin responded, okay. It's settled. Let's leave the capital, stay away from the places where power is divided, and go to the days of idle clouds and wild cranes. Gu Huayu was moved by what King Qin said. She longed for this kind of carefree, free, and life like a couple of gods and gods. Okay, let's live somewhere we like, stay for a few more years, and then go to the next place. Okay. King Qin responded warmly, okay, I'll listen to you. As long as you like, you can do whatever you want. Gu Huayu fixed the makeup for King Qin and handed him a mirror, okay, take a look, are you satisfied? King Qin took the mirror. At first glance, he was surprised by the unfamiliar appearance in the mirror. The originally fair skin turned into a wheat color, the melon-shaped face almost looked like a Chinese character, and the tall bridge of the nose seemed to have sunk a lot. King Qin raised his hand and touched his face. "Xiao, how did you do it to make my jawline look wider?" Gu Huayu said while applying makeup on herself. "This is not difficult. Use the color difference of the powder to refine it. Your skin is good and it is easy to apply makeup, which saves me a lot of trouble. How do you like it? Are you satisfied?" King Qin nodded. "Very good, thank you." Gu Huayu smiled and said, "As long as you're satisfied." Gu Huayu put on makeup for herself with ease, and soon she was done with it. Turning around to look at King Qin, "Qinjian, look at me, what do you think? Does it look good?" King Qin kept staring at Gu Huayu, watching her become what she is now. He nodded and said, "It looks good." Gu Huayu put the things into the dressing case. "Let's go, take my car. Today I asked King Yu to change into an ordinary car, but I didn't recognize him." End of this chapter. The Rebirth of Space, the lucky girl from a farm family. Author, He Would Fire Every. Chapter 327. Chapter 327 True Character Appears. King Yu drove the car to the Yalan intersection and stopped. He turned around and said, "Princess, Prince, we have arrived at the Yalan intersection. Get off the car from here and walk more than 10 feet to the Sunan Silver Tower." King Qin got out of the car first, then turned around to help Gu Huayu get out of the car. Gu Huayu smiled at King Qin and said, "Qinjian, you don't need help, I can get down by myself." King Qin did not stop and reminded in a low voice, "You have forgotten that we are pretending to be a loving couple. As husbands and wives, we should be considerate and take care of our wives." Gu Huayu raised her head and looked at King Qin. Qin dynasty. Gu Huayu raised his eyebrows and then said, "Am I right?" Gu Huayu laughed and said, "You get into the role so quickly." King Qin felt pleased with himself and said with a bit of pride, "It's okay, as you said, this is called acting in true colors." Gu Huayu glanced at King Qin charmingly and said, "Let's go." The king of Qin was so captivated by Gu Huayu's charming look that he lost his mind. This extremely charming and gentle look not only made him intoxicated, but also gave him a feeling of déjà vu. It seems like he has seen it somewhere, but where exactly? He couldn't tell. Gu Huayu walked forward, took 2 steps, and found that King Qin had not followed. She turned around and shouted, "Qinjian, let's go." Seeing that King Qin had not moved, Gu Huayu came over and pulled his sleeve. "What's wrong?" King Qin came to his senses and said, "Nothing, let's go." Gu Huayu felt suspicious and asked, "Is everything okay?" King Qin lowered his head and said, "I'm sorry. The look in your eyes just now made me obsessed." Gu Huayu didn't expect that King Qin would suddenly speak flirtatious words, so she looked around in fright, fearing that others would hear her. "Qinjian, we are on the street." King Qin said seriously, "I know, your eyes really fascinate me." Gu Huayu wanted to cover King Qin's mouth with her hand, glared at him angrily, and pulled him forward. "Save the nice things to say back home. Let's go shopping first." King Qin turned his head and looked at Gu Huayu, who had a blushing face, and let her pull her forward. The intimate movements between the two attracted passers-by's attention, but the person involved was completely unaware of it. The two of them walked for a while and saw people lining up in front of them. Gu Huayu let go of King Qin's hand and said, "Qinjian, we're here." King Qin looked up and said, "These are all returned goods from Baoking Silver Building? Let's go over and have a look." Gu Huayu also found it incredible. She walked to the back of the queue and asked curiously, "Auntie, what are you waiting in line to buy?" The woman in line looked at Gu Huayu and King Qin and said, "Girl, you don't know yet. Sunan Silver House is holding a warm winter sale today. All items in the shop are 30% off, just for this one day. King Qin looked at the long queue and said, "This is the silver building. Even if it's 30% off, it's not cheap. Why are there so many people lining up?" The woman said, "My daughter-in-law is about to give birth, and I have fallen in love with his pair of silver bracelets and a pair of longevity locks. I took this opportunity to buy them quickly. As ordinary people, saving money means making money, so of course we can save money." The woman is slightly fat and has a kind face. She talks and smiles. She has a small dimple on her face when she smiles, which is very attractive. Gu Huayu nodded and agreed, "Auntie is right, saving money is making money." With Gu Huayu's approval, the smile on the woman's face deepened, and she said with a crooked eyebrow, "This is a rare opportunity, little lady, please buy some. Let me tell you, my family lives nearby, and the things from Sunan Yinlu are of excellent workmanship and the prices are reasonable. Take the longevity lock as an example. In the first half of the year, my mother-in-law bought a pair for my grandson. It was not as good as the one from Sujia Silver House and was more expensive. The longevity locks made by Sunan Yinlu are excellent and the price is reasonable." Gu Huayu heard that the woman was from nearby and had something in mind. He turned to King Qin and said, "Qinjian, how about we queue up and buy some too?" King Qin received the look from Gu Huayu and immediately understood it. Before King Qin could say anything, the woman enthusiastically helped, "Sir, your little lady is very pretty and beautiful. Just buy her some headdresses and dress her up beautifully. It will be pleasing to your eyes, how good." King Qin looked at the woman, then at the long queue, and said, "It's not that I'm reluctant to buy it for her. I'm afraid that she'll be tired. How long will it take to wait in this long queue?" The woman smiled and said, "The two of us are very good friends. One is afraid that the other will be tired, and the other wants to save money for the other." Gu Huayu smiled and said coquettishly to King Qin, "Anyway, we have nothing to do, so just pretend that we are tired from shopping and rest here." "Okay." The woman said, looking at the leader of the team, "It actually won't take long. There are 20 people in front of us." King Qin raised his hand and rubbed Gu Huayu, and said reluctantly, "Okay. I really can't do anything to you." Gu Huayu said happily, "Thank you Qinjian." After saying that, Gu Huayu pulled the king of Qin to line up behind the woman. "Auntie, we will line up next to you." The woman nodded repeatedly and said, "Okay, okay. Where does the young lady live? Are you out shopping today?" Gu Huayu replied, "My family lives in Wutong Lane. My husband and I have nothing to do today, so he said he would take me out for a walk." "What's your surname, aunt? How should I call you?" The woman smiled and said, "Young lady is too polite. How can we rough people afford the word noble? My surname is Lu, and people who are familiar with me call me Aunt Lu. What's your surname?" After the woman finished speaking, she looked at Gu Huayu and then at King Qin. Gu Huayu picked up the conversation casually, "Hello Aunt Lu, my surname is Gu, and my husband's surname is Zhou. Is Aunt Lu a native of the capital?" Aunt Lu nodded and said, "Yes, my ancestors are all from the capital and live in that alley." The woman raised her hand and pointed to the left front. Gu Huayu looked in the direction of the woman's finger and said, "It's so close, Aunt Lu. How many years has the silver shop been open? Are their products really good?" Gu Huayu asked cautiously. Aunt Lu said with a smile, "Don't worry, little lady, Sunan Yinlu opened when I was in my teens. It has been more than 20 years ago. Its reputation has always been very good. Most of the people lining up in front are from nearby stores people." To prove that what she said was true, Aunt Lu pointed at the people in the queue, called out their names, and waved to them. Then he continued to say to Gu Huayu, "Mr. Su, the owner of Sunan Silver House, is kind-hearted. He will always help anyone who is having a hard time near Yalan Road. My natal family is just behind Sunan Yinlu. I am the third eldest child in my family. I have an elder brother and an older sister, and there are 4 younger brothers and 3 younger sisters. There are many people in the family and they often don't have enough to eat. Mr. Su's family lived in this shop at that time. This shop had a backyard. There was a shop in front and people lived in the backyard. Mr. Su and Mrs. Huang often ask their servants to give us something to eat when they go in and out of the backyard. Gu Huayu didn't expect to meet Sujin's old neighbor. She praised her good luck and said, Mr. Su and his wife are so caring and good people. When Aunt Lu said this, she sighed slightly, her mood suddenly dropped, and she nodded, Master Su's family is indeed good people, but they are also pitiful people. Poor man? Why are you so pitiful? Gu Huayu asked in confusion. Aunt Lu nodded and lowered her voice, Mr. Su only had an only daughter, who was born in the same year as my sister. She died inexplicably 20 years ago. Now the couple has no children, and it makes me sad to think about it. Gu Huayu opened her eyes wide and looked at Aunt Lu, and asked in shock, I was born in the same year as your sister, and wasn't she very old when she died? How did she die? Aunt Lu nodded and whispered, I was 18 when I died. It is said that he committed suicide by hanging. He might have been killed by someone. Gu Huayu looked at Aunt Lu in surprise, he was killed by someone? Didn't Mr. Su report it to the official? Aunt Lu said, I reported it. After the officials came to see it, they said he committed suicide and stopped investigating. Gu Huayu said, if the white-haired man gives the black-haired man a gift, wouldn't Mr. Su be sad to death? Aunt Lu said, who says it's not the case? One night, Master Su and Mrs. Huang's hair turned completely white. Mrs. Huang, in particular, was blinded by crying. She was so pitiful. We all thought that Mr. Su would close his shop and return to Yangzhou. Mr. Su is from Yangzhou. Unexpectedly, Mr. Su did not close the shop, but bought a house in Qingquan Lane, and moved to Qingquan Lane with Mrs. Huang, while the shop remained open. Aunt Lu, why are you here in line? Whatever you want, just tell me directly, and I'll keep it for you. Aunt Lu smiled and said, thank you Xuanzi. I am just idle at home. I want to go out for a walk. Xuanzi smiled and said, Auntie, please come in. Aunt Lu turned to Gu Huayu and said, Miss Gu, let's go in. Gu Huayu nodded and said, okay. Gu Huayu reached out and took King Qin's hand, and followed Aunt Lu into the inner shop. Aunt Lu entered the shop, turned around and told Gu Huayu, and went straight to find the longevity lock. King Qin looked at the crowded shops and asked, are we still buying? Gu Huayu shook her head, let's go, it's too crowded. When the two of them came out of the shop, King Qin asked, where are we going next? Gu Huayu raised her hand and looked at her watch, it's not yet time, let's find a place to sit. King Qin looked around, pointed to the tea house not far away, and said, there is a tea house in front of you, go and sit there. Gu Huayu nodded in agreement. The two of them entered the tea house. Gu Huayu chose a private room in the back upstairs and ordered a pot of melon slices and 2 plates of snacks. After a while, the waiter brought in the refreshments. The waiter stepped back, and soon Xia Shan came in, moved the utensils of the tea house aside, placed the refreshments he had brought in, and then left. Gu Huayu looked at the tea set on the table in surprise. King Qin had taken the resurrection pill, and his body was not afraid of poison. It can only be the emperor's arrangement that the secret guards carry tea sets with them. King Qin poured a cup of tea and put it in front of Gu Huayu, and explained, these are the instructions from the emperor. The man just now was Xia Shan, who was responsible for the deployment of secret guards. Gu Huayu asked, Your Majesty, doesn't he know that you are immune to all poisons? King Qin shook his head, I haven't told my father, and he doesn't know. Our harvest today is not small. Gu Huayu picked up the cup, lowered her head and sipped the tea. Next, let's have someone check on Miss Su. King Qin nodded, okay. King Qin said as he handed a plate of mung bean cake to Gu Huayu, have a try. Chef Du made it. It tastes good. Gu Huayu stretched out her hand to twist a piece and ate it, nodded and said, it's not too sweet, it suits my taste. King Qin pursed his lips and told Chef Du not to make the food too sweet. Sure enough, she liked it. Seeing Gu Huayu take 2 mouthfuls, King Qin handed the tea over and said, it's too dry. Take a sip of tea. Gu Huayu held the mung bean cake in one hand and the dregs in the other. She had no extra hand to hold the teacup, so she had to take a sip of tea from King Qin's hand, then put all the mung bean cake in her mouth, patted the dregs on her hand, and reached out to touch King Qin's hand. Teacup inside. King Qin moved his hand to the side and said, what are you doing? You eat what you have, and I'll do it. Gu Huayu had a mouthful of mung bean cake in her mouth. She was afraid that it would spray all over the floor, so she had to compromise and chew it for a few times before swallowing it. King Qin handed over the tea at the right time. Gu Huayu took 2 sips of the tea from King Qin's hand to make sure there was no mung bean residue in her mouth, and then she said, Qinjian, you have made me useless. King Qin poured tea again, looked up at Gu Huayu, and said seriously, I feel very comfortable and enjoy being able to do something for you. This is my hobby, and you have to fulfill it. King Qin said so righteously that Gu Huayu couldn't find a reason to refute. She looked at him blankly for a while and then said, how dare you spoil me and then say to me that you are tired and annoying, if you mess with me, or if you turn around and favor someone else, I will tear you apart. King Qin smiled and said, don't dream, that day will never come. You'd better keep your word. King Qin raised his hand and rubbed Gu Huayu's head, don't worry, I will only have you and only you here. Gu Huayu had to admit that the guy in front of her was speaking more and more flirtatiously, and he opened his mouth to speak. Okay, I'll wait and see, you'd better spend your whole life proving it, Gu Huayu said coquettishly. Not just in this life, I will use my lifetime to prove that you are the only one in my heart. Gu Huayu was stunned. She was particularly sensitive to the past and present lives and reincarnations in the next life because she had experienced them. In the past 2 lives that passed by in a hurry, he was not there. Was it because she was in a hurry without him, or was it because she came to meet him that she left in a hurry? Xiao, what are you thinking about? King Qin saw Gu Huayu stunned, stood up and walked to Gu Huayu's side, raised his hand and waved it in front of her eyes. Gu Huayu came back to her senses and smiled at King Qin, I was so taken away by your words. King Qin raised his hand to lift Gu Huayu's chin, lowered his head and kissed her. Gu Huayu was stunned for a moment, then raised her hands to wrap around King Qin's neck, and responded to his rhythm. After lingering for a while, King Qin whispered, little guy, what I say is from the bottom of my heart. Gu Huayu snuggled into King Qin's arms, nodded and said, I know. King Qin looked down at Gu Huayu, rubbed Gu Huayu's hair with his face, and said with a spear, Xiao, let's get married in the next year, okay. At this moment, King Qin's words were so tempting that Gu Huayu responded softly without even thinking about it, okay. We will get married in the next year. There was a knock at the door. Gu Huayu was so startled that she immediately stood up from King Qin's arms and sat down opposite King Qin in a panic. End of this chapter. The Rebirth of Space, the lucky girl from a farm family. Author, he would fire every. Chapter 328. Chapter 328 Angry. The king of Qin stretched out his hand to straighten the hem of Gu Huayu's clothes, and then shouted, come in. Xiaoshan opened the door and came in, saying, Your Majesty, Princess, Bai Wei, who is beside second young Master Li, appeared in the alley behind. It seems that he is going to Sunan Silver Tower. The four people Li Tao served closely were Quanzi, Bai Wei, Ren Yuan and Liang. Quanzi is familiar with Liang and Gu Huayu. Although she is not familiar with Bai Wei and Ren Yuan, she knows them. Who? Gu Huayu asked in shock. Not only Gu Huayu was shocked, King Qin also found it incredible. In their impression, Li Tao and Sunan Yinlu should be the same people who could fight together. Why did Li Tao's people come to Sunan Silver Tower? Is there anything they don't know about this? Xia Shan pointed to the window and said, "It's downstairs. The prince and the princess can see for themselves." Gu Huayu and King Qin stood up one after another and walked to the window as quickly as possible. Compared with the hustle and bustle of the front street, the back alley is much deserted. Xia Shan also walked over and pointed at a young man wearing a smoky gray gown. "Your Majesty, Princess, Bai Wei is over there. We are almost at the backyard of Sunan Yinlu." Gu Huayu looked in the direction of Xia Shan's finger. This person was indeed Bai Wei. Gu Huayu stared at Bai Wei, and a series of questions popped up in her mind. What is the relationship between Li Tao and Sunan Silver House? Is it Li Tao's fault that Sunan Silver House is dealing with Baoking Silver House this time? Gu Huayu watched Bai Wei open the door to the backyard of Sunan Yinlu with a series of questions and went straight into the backyard of Sunan Yinlu. Looking at Bai Wei's familiarity with the road, this might not be his first time back. Gu Huayu exchanged glances with King Qin, and King Qin ordered, "Keep an eye on Sunan Silver Tower." Xia Shan bowed and said, "Yes, I understand, little one." Then he withdrew. Gu Huayu returned to the table, picked up the teacup and sipped the tea. King Qin poured himself a cup of tea, took a sip and asked, "Xiao, what do you think about this?" Gu Huayu put down her teacup and shook her head. "I don't know, things seem to be getting more and more complicated. I can't understand Li Er. He and Li Chang." Gu Huayu did not say the next words. In her heart, Li Tao and Li Chang are different. The king of Qin raised his hand to refill Gu Huayu's tea. While refilling the tea, he said, "Li Tao is different from Li Chang." King Qin's thoughts were consistent with his own, which made Gu Huayu perk up. She raised her head to look at King Qin and asked, "Qinjian, can you explain it carefully?" King Qin pushed the teacup in front of her. "Li Tao looks a little skinny, muddy, and sometimes even a little uninhibited and deviant, but in fact, that is just his appearance. The real Li Tao has a sound mind, principles, and a sense of responsibility. Bottom line. Of course, Li Cheng is also good. It's just that, as the eldest son of Li, Li Cheng cannot do as he pleases like Li Tao when thinking about problems. Sometimes, he has no choice but to do things that he doesn't want to do but has to do." Gu Huayu suddenly thought of Li Cheng in front of King Qi. His eyes were always on King Qi, and he was a bit reserved in speaking and doing things. Gu Huayu asked, "Is Li Cheng working for King Qi?" King Qi nodded. "They are originally a family, and the imperial concubine is their biological aunt." Gu Huayu thought for a while, sighed slightly and said, "If we really fight for that position, we and them will eventually be on opposite sides." "Right." King Qin smiled bitterly and nodded, "Yes, if that day comes, we will stand opposite to them. Unless someone gives up voluntarily." Gu Huayu twitched the corner of her lips, smiled dryly, and said, "It's too difficult. Even if you give up, who will believe it? No one will take it lightly before ascending to a big position, and no one dares to take it lightly, right?" King Qin leaned back and sighed, "Yes, even if I give up, who will believe it? In order to survive, you have to be very alert, avoid open guns, and guard against hidden arrows. Let someone check Li Tao." King Qin didn't want to continue this heavy topic, so he turned the topic to Li Tao, looked up at Gu Huayu, and asked her what she meant. Meeting the questioning gaze of King Qin, Gu Huayu was speechless for a moment. Li Tao has no ill intentions towards her. Not only that, Li Tao treats her sincerely. They can be regarded as good friends. According to her original intention, she did not want to check Li Tao. Gu Huayu thought for a while and said, Qin Jian, can you leave this matter to me? King Qin hesitated for a moment and asked, can you give me a reason? Gu Huayu said, I want to ask Li Tao personally instead of checking him secretly. Since I regard him as a friend, I want to trust him. King Qin nodded, okay, I'll listen to you. You can handle this matter. I won't interfere. Thank you, Gu Huayu said. King Qin stretched out his hand to rub Gu Huayu's head and scratched her nose casually. You've seen me again, haven't you? Gu Huayu stuck out her tongue and said with a smile, I'm sorry, I forgot again. King Qin reached out and pinched Gu Huayu's face, and said dotingly, little guy, we are a family. I am your husband-in-law and the person closest to you. If you thank me for an outsider, I will feel sad. At this point, King Qin paused and then said, just like, I thank you for other women, what do you think? After King Qin's words fell, Gu Huayu's mind had already imagined the scene of King Qin thanking other women. Sorrow suddenly welled up in her heart, and she bared her teeth and said, how dare you? King Qin looked at the little guy who had knocked over the vinegar vat and said, look at you, I'm just giving you an analogy. Gu Huayu said unreasonably, I can't even use an analogy. King Qin tilted his head and looked at Gu Huayu and asked, are you angry? Are you jealous? You're so fierce, like a tigress. Gu Huayu stared, opened her mouth wide, and acted like a tiger biting someone. If you dare, I will bite you. King Qin nodded slightly and said, you only allow the state officials to set fires, but not the people to light lamps. Gu Huayu put away her ferocious expression, replaced it with an aggrieved one, and said, I was wrong. If you don't do this again, you are not allowed to be nice to other women. King Qin put his head on his hands and said slowly, I can't guarantee this. If I fail to do it in the future, I won't break my promise. At this moment, Gu Huayu was filled with jealousy. She stared at King Qin for a while, stood up angrily, turned around and walked out. King Qin thought that Gu Huayu would pounce on him to argue with him, but the little guy didn't follow common sense and turned around and left. King Qin quickly stood up and said, Xiao, where are you going? Gu Huayu turned around and said, don't worry about it. After saying that, she didn't forget to kick the chair over with her feet to block King Qin's way, and then left quickly. When Gu Huayu went out, Xia Shan saw her, bowed to her and said, Princess. Gu Huayu ignored it, crossed Xia Shan, and hurried downstairs. Xia Shan looked at Gu Huayu's back and was stunned. The princess was walking so fast. The king of Qin came out of the house and asked, where is Xiao? Xia Shan pointed to the stairs and said, I'm going downstairs. My lord, do you want to chase me? The king of Qin ignored Xia Shan and hurried to the stairs. King Qin rushed downstairs. When the waiter saw him, he stopped him quickly and said, Sir, you haven't paid the bill yet. King Qin touched his body and then remembered that he was penniless. These days when he goes out, it is very crowded, and there are a lot of bright and secret guards following him. He has no chance to pay, so he doesn't take any money with him when he goes out. When the waiter saw that he had not found any silver, he said, don't be impatient, sir, and look for it slowly. One of the secret guards saw that King Qin had no money, so he took out a silver coin and handed it over. I paid for this man. King Qin looked at the secret guard, cupped his hands and said, thank you very much. The secret guard was so frightened that he bowed and returned the salute, you're welcome. King Qin hurriedly walked towards the door and looked around. Where was Gu Huayu's figure? King Qin thought to himself that the little guy's temper was so bad that he couldn't even take a joke. King Qin hurriedly walked to the Yalan intersection, hoping that Qing Yu's carriage was still there. Mr. Zhou, why are you alone? Where is Mrs. Gu? Aunt Lu came towards him with a basket in hand. When she saw King Qin, she greeted him warmly. Aunt Lu of the Qin dynasty cupped her hands and said, "Hello Aunt Lu, my wife is waiting in the car. I'll go and look for her right now." Aunt Lu said with a smile on her face, "You two are in love and your life will be happy." The king of Qin handed over his hand again and said, "Thank you, Aunt Lu." Aunt Lu said, "I won't delay you any longer. You can go as soon as possible, so as not to keep Miss Gu waiting for a long time. If you have some free time later, take Miss Gu to rest at home." "Thank you Aunt Lu for your kindness. I have time to see Aunt Lu." Aunt Lu smiled and said, "Go quickly." King Qin bid farewell to Aunt Lu and walked to the intersection of Yalan Road. He stood in the bustling street and looked around, but did not see Qing Yu. A secret guard approached and said softly, "Sir, the princess has left in a car." King Qin asked, "Is anyone following?" The secret guard replied, "Master Hui, there are 2 people following you." King Qin said, "Go and ask Rugjuan to drive over." The secret guard retreated, and after a while, Rugjuan drove over. After King Qin got on the carriage, he said, "Go to Wutong Lane." Seeing King Qin's sullen face, Rugjuan knew that the 2 of them were quarreling again, so he didn't dare to ask more questions and just concentrated on driving. Not long after the carriage started, King Qin said again, "Go back to the palace first." Rugjuan immediately turned his horse's head and went to the Prince of Qin's mansion. Gu Huayu came out of the tea house, got in the car and told King Yu, "Go to Baekangmen." King Yu was stunned for a moment, then bravely asked, "Is the princess going to cause trouble for Miss Wang San?" Gu Huayu was amused by King Yu's words. "What's wrong with you? Miss Wang San didn't mess with me today, so why should I bother her?" King Yu asked in confusion, "Okay, what are you going to do in Baekangmen, then?" Gu Huayu asked, "Only Wang Xiang's family lives in Baekang Gate." King Yu shook his head, "That's not true." Gu Huayu leaned against the carriage and explained, "I'm going to look for Li Tao." King Yu patted his head and said, "Oh, I forgot about the Li mansion. The main reason is that the reputation of the Prime Minister Wang is too great. When I talk about Baekangmen, I first think of the Prime Minister Wang's mansion." Gu Huayu said nothing. King Yu didn't get a response from Gu Huayu and stopped talking. Gu Huayu thought about King Qin's words, but a trace of sourness surged in her heart, and she pursed her lips in annoyance. Seeing that Gu Huayu didn't respond, Qing Yu asked tentatively, "Princess, where is the prince?" Gu Huayu was angry with someone. King Yu asked someone stubbornly, and Gu Huayu said angrily, "I don't know." As soon as King Yu heard that Gu Huayu's tone was wrong, he knew he had stirred a hornet's nest and immediately stopped talking. After a while, King Yu thought about what Wang Qin said about girls not being sulky, as sulking would make them sick, so he asked carefully, "Princess, why did the prince make you angry? Tell me, little one." The younger one went to the prince to argue and help the princess vent her anger. Gu Huayu was asked by Qing Yu, how could she tell Qing Yu about her flirting with King Qin? Besides, she is not the kind of person who talks about her own affairs with you. Your Majesty didn't mess with me, so don't think too much. By the way, how do you think about what I told you last time? If you are not satisfied with Lonicera, I will give her to someone else." Gu Huayu was afraid that King Yu would ask again, so she quickly changed the subject. Sure enough, King Yu immediately became nervous after hearing Gu Huayu's question. He was embarrassed to say yes, but also afraid that if he didn't say it, the master would promise honeysuckle to someone else. He only said, "The princess is the master, and the marriage depends on the princess make the decision." King Yu's face turned red with embarrassment. Gu Huayu smiled and said, "So, you agree?" King Yu said, "Thank you very much, princess, for worrying about me." Gu Huayu said, "You have been with me for many years, and Lonicera has also been with me for many years. She is a poor person, and I promised her to you. You must treat her wholeheartedly and don't let her down. Do you understand? King Yu promised. I have been with the princess for several years. The princess also knows what kind of person I am. If I marry Lonicera, I will naturally treat her wholeheartedly and will never do anything to let her down. Come. Gu Huayu nodded. Let me remind you, just know it in your mind. Lonicera will not do anything to hurt you. If you hurt her, I will take care of you. King Yu nodded repeatedly. Yes, please remember the princess's teachings. After settling the matter between King Yu and Lonicera, Gu Huayu felt much better and said, okay, I'll talk to Aunt Wang when I get back and let her find a day to settle your affairs. Qing Yu hurriedly said, Princess, don't worry, the matter between Xiao and Lonicera should be settled first. After the princess and the prince get married, Xiao and Lonicera will get married. Gu Huayu thought about it and felt that what King Yu said made sense. Lonicera is the maidservant beside her. When she gets married, she will definitely marry into Prince Jin's palace with her. Now that they are married, they are bound to buy a house near the princess's mansion and settle down. The princess's mansion is some distance from Prince Jin's mansion. They will have to buy another house in the future, which is really troublesome. Okay, I'll do as you say. I'll get you two engaged first. When you have time, go around Prince Jin's mansion and see if there's a house you like. If so. When Gu Huayu said this, she suddenly remembered that she was still angry with King Qin, and quickly changed her words. It's still early, let's talk about it later. King Yu nodded and said, yes, this matter is not urgent. When the princess and the prince get married, it will be too late for me to take my time and look for him. Gu Huayu became irritated again as she thought about the king of Qin saying that he wanted to be nice to other women. Thank you book friends for your generous reward, thank you very much. Thank you all for your votes, thank you. Take a bow. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Rebirth of Space, the lucky girl from a farm family. Author, he would fire every. Chapter 329. Chapter 329, Doing Evil. When the car arrived at the Baekang Gate area, King Yu asked, Princess, are we going directly to Li's mansion? But we didn't hand over the greeting cards. Isn't it bad to go directly like this? Qing Yu said it very euphemistically. Gu Huayu was a smart person and immediately understood what Qing Yu meant. It is really against the rules for a girl to come to her house to find a man. But she and Li Tao's sister Li Yiyi looked at each other with disgust, so it was obviously not a good choice to visit Li Yiyi. Gu Huayu rubbed her hands in worry and shook the purse in her bag. She suddenly remembered that there was a jade pendant given to her by Li Tao in her purse. So the plan came from his heart and he said, we can't come directly to the door. You can find a tea house later. I will wait in the tea house. You can go to Li's house and pass a message to ask Li Tao to come and see me. King Yu responded cheerfully, okay, I understand. King Yu responded and looked around for the tea house. We just passed by a tea house, wait for the younger one to turn the car around. With that said, King Yu jumped out of the car and pulled the horse to turn the car around. At the tea house, Gu Huayu asked for a private room. After a while, King Yu parked the car and got up. He asked, I'm going to the Li mansion now. Does the princess have anything else to explain? Gu Huayu took out a jade pendant from her purse and handed it over. Give this to the concierge of Li mansion and ask him to give this to Li Tao. If Li Tao is in the house, he will definitely come out to see you, and then you just bring him over. If Li Tao is not in the house, you can come back directly without saying anything. King Yu took the jade pendant, leaned forward and said, okay, I understand. King Yu exited the elegant room and went straight to Li mansion. Gu Huayu was in the private room. When the waiter came in with tea and left, he turned around and entered the space to take off the makeup on his face. Gu Huayu was worried that someone would come in, so she hurriedly took off her makeup and returned to the room, drank tea and waited for others, thinking about how to talk to Li Tao. Li Mansion, Li Tao organized today's homework and waited for his brother to check it in the evening. Father, my brother attaches great importance to the Spring Festival after the New Year, and has been checking his homework very diligently recently. Kwanzaa came in and said, Sir, the concierge sent this after saying that, Kwanzaa presented the jade pendant. Li Tao took the jade pendant and took a look at it. He suddenly stood up and asked, where is the person? Where is he? Seeing Li Tao's nervous expression, Kwanzaa knew that the matter concerned Princess Yan Ran, so he leaned over and said, Master, I'm at the door. Li Tao stepped out and walked out. Because he was walking in a hurry, his knee hit the table. The pain made Li Tao bend down and touch his leg, and then hurriedly walk toward the door. Huanza was busy following behind. Li Tao walked to the door and asked, where is the person? The concierge pointed to the willow tree not far away. Second master, over there. King Yu has seen Li Tao come out and is walking towards Li Tao. Li Tao walked over in a few steps and asked, why are you here? Is there something wrong with Xiao? King Yu bowed and said, yes, the princess is looking for the second master. Before King Yu could finish speaking, Li Tao asked, where is Xiao Yuran? Where is she? Is she in trouble again? Qing Yu shook his head, back to the second master, the princess is not in trouble. However, the princess said that she has something to do with the second master. At this moment, the princess is waiting for the second master at the GNUNT house at the intersection, and invites the second master to accompany him. Go. Li Tao turned to look at Kwanzaa and said, tell mother, I have something to go out and I won't have dinner at the house. Please lead the way. Li Tao turned around and explained to Qing Yu. King Yu bowed, turned around and walked towards the tea house. Kwanzaa said to the concierge servant, go and report to madam that the second master has something to do and will not have dinner at the house. Hanza quickly chased after him. Li Tao followed Qing Yu to the tea house. After finding out Gu Huayu's room, he said to Qing Yu, wait outside the room. After speaking, Li Tao raised his hand and knocked on the door, and a voice from the room responded, come in. Li Tao pushed the door open and went in. He closed the door behind him, folded his hands on his chest, and stared at Gu Huayu while leaning against the door. He asked with a half smile, what wind blew up today? Did it blow you here? If I remember correctly, this is the first time you have taken the initiative to look for me. Gu Huayu met Li Tao's gaze, raised her eyebrows, and asked, are you surprised? Are you surprised? Li Tao shook his head, I'm not surprised. I'm a little scared. I thought you were in trouble again. Again. Am I a troublesome person in your heart? Gu Huayu prolonged the sound of the word you. Li Tao said, aren't you a troublemaker? From the time you arrived in the capital, you can calculate for yourself how many troubles you have encountered in half a year. Gu Huayu thought about it for a while, and it seemed like that was the case. She pointed to the chair opposite and said, don't be such a talker, come and sit down. I have something to ask you. Li Tao walked to the opposite side and sat down, and said, let me just say, how could you be so kind as to come looking for me? You really don't go to the Three Treasures Palace for anything. Trouble, tell me, why are you looking for me? Gu Huayu raised her hand as if to hit Li Tao. Li Tao kept staring at Gu Huayu. When he saw her raising her hand, he instinctively leaned back and said loudly, Gu Xiao, please speak up and don't make any moves. Don't give me random names, Gu Huayu warned. Yes, you troublemaker, wrong, it's Gu Xiao, I'm sorry, I was too quick. Li Tao slapped himself in the face with his hand as he spoke. Gu Huayu glared at Li Tao, raised her hand to pour him a cup of tea, then looked at him with her right hand on her chin, and asked, "Yesterday, Sunan Yinlu took action against Baoking Yinlu, was it under your instructions?" Li Tao's expression froze. He looked up at Gu Huayu and saw that she was staring at him closely. He cleared his throat to hide his discomfort. Of course, Li Tao did not deny it and just said, "You know everything." After receiving Li Tao's affirmative answer, Gu Huayu sat up straight and said, "Is Sunan Yinlu really under your command?" Li Tao looked at Gu Huayu's reaction and knew that he answered quickly. He picked up the teacup and took a sip of tea, then shook his head, "I'm not the owner of Sunan Silver House, so how can I instruct them to do what they do? The only person who can instruct Sunan Silver House to do something is Mr. Sujins." Gu Huayu was speechless and looked at Li Tao, waiting for his next words. Li Tao stopped talking and said no more. He reached out to pick up the teacup and sip the tea again, then put the teacup down. Seeing Gu Huayu still staring at him, she said, "What are you watching me do? Everything I said is true." Gu Huayu said, "I didn't say you told lies, why are you nervous?" Gu Huayu leaned back and found a comfortable position for herself. "Are you acquainted with Sujins?" Li Tao didn't hide anything, and nodded truthfully, "I have been friends with Mr. Su for many years." "Have we known each other for years? It seems that you have a very close relationship, tell me your story." Gu Huayu sat up straight again. Li Tao hesitated for a moment, with a troubled expression on his face. It seemed that he didn't want to say more about this matter. Gu Huayu saw Li Tao's hesitation and asked, "What's wrong? Can't you say it?" Li Tao thought for a while and said, "I can tell you, but you promise not to tell anyone about it." "But just now, King Qin and I were near the Sunan Silver building on Yalan Road and saw Bai Wei entering the backyard of the Sunan Silver building." Li Tao instantly understood why Gu Huayu came to look for him. He also knew in his heart that even if he didn't tell King Qin would still be able to find out his relationship with Sujins. So he said, "Well, you can tell whoever you want. Anyway, in your heart, I am the least important one." Gu Huayu laughed at Li Tao's angry words. He tilted his head and looked at Li Tao, raised his brows, and asked, "Are you annoyed?" Li Tao rolled his eyes at her and said angrily, "Why are you upset? I'm not as stingy as you think." Gu Huayu pursed her lips and said, "As long as you're not annoyed, tell me the story between you and Mr. Su." Li Tao picked up the teacup and took a sip of tea, thinking about how to speak. Gu Huayu was impatient. Seeing that he didn't speak for a long time, she urged, "What's wrong? You really don't want to say it? Then I won't ask. I have something else to do, so I'll go back first." With that said, Gu Huayu stood up and prepared to leave. Li Tao said hurriedly, "What are you in a hurry for? I'm already ready to say it, right? Sit down." Gu Huayu said "Oh" and sat down again. "Okay. Since you are willing to speak, then I will listen." Li Tao glared at Huayu and said, "Have you eaten gunpowder today?" Gu Huayu did not answer Li Tao's words and only urged, "Speak quickly." Li Tao looked at Gu Huayu and muttered, "What a temper." Then he continued, "I have known the Su family for more than 10 years. At that time, I was only over 8 years old. I told you that when I was a child, I was very naughty and playful, and I never left home all day long." Gu Huayu nodded, "You know this, the Demon King incarnation. How can he have a family?" Li Tao shouted to Gu Huayu, "Do you want to listen any more?" Gu Huayu nodded, "Listen, please tell me." Li Tao glanced at Huayu sideways, and then said, "One day, a group of friends and I were wandering on the street and wandered into a secluded alley near Qingquan Road in the south of the city. There, we met a blind old woman. The old woman stood alone in the alley. There were a few guys with us who were very annoying. When the old lady couldn't see her, they got bad intentions and started playing pranks. Someone threw something at the old woman to see if she could avoid it. Someone put a bamboo pole in front of the old woman to see if she could step over it? No matter in the past life or in this life, Gu Huayu hates such unscrupulous people the most. When she heard this, she immediately. The fire was boiling. He scolded, Li Er, who are the people you keep friends with? It's not that she is a blind old woman. She is blind, how can she see? Li Tao saw Gu Huayu's angry expression and quickly explained, they are just a few naughty children, do you still want to listen? Gu Huayuan said angrily, is bullying the old, weak, sick, and disabled just making trouble? This is evil. If my aunt encounters him, she will beat him to death. Li Tao hurriedly comforted him, yes, you are right, if you do evil, those guys are bad people. Do you still listen? Gu Huayu glared at him angrily and said angrily, listen, go on. After finishing speaking, Gu Huayu added, no wonder you were so virtuous when I saw you in Hongcheng, hum. Li Tao looked a little embarrassed when Gu Huayu exposed the dark history of his past, and said, forget it if you don't listen, I won't talk about it anymore. Seeing that Li Tao was angry, Gu Huayu softened her tone and said, say, I'm listening. Li Tao glanced at Gu Huayu and then said, my wife was hit by something thrown by someone, which made everyone laugh. I think the old woman is pitiful, so I stopped them from continuing to do evil. There are two guys who are having fun and don't listen to me at all. Gu Huayu mocked, aren't you the little devil in the world? There are people who don't listen to you. Li Tao said, how old was I then? A child over 8 years old. Gu Huayu said with a clear look, oh, I understand. At that time, your name was not famous enough. What name is not loud enough? At that time, I didn't have a name. Do you want to listen? If not, I won't talk. Gu Huayu smiled and said, okay, you tell me. Li Tao warned, if you want to listen, listen carefully and don't interrupt again. Gu Huayu nodded and said, okay, don't interrupt me. You can continue. Li Tao asked, where did I just say? Gu Huayu reminded, there are two people who don't listen to you. Li Tao nodded and continued, those two are a few years older than me, and they have some influence among a group of people. Not only did they not listen to me, they also let others join them in playing tricks on the old woman. It's disgusting. What should you do? Just watch them do bad things, Gu Huayu asked. Li Tao looked at Gu Huayu dissatisfied and asked, am I so cowardly in your heart? No, aren't those two a few years older than you, they don't listen to you, and you can't beat them, what can you do? Li Tao said, I can't beat him, can't I think of a way? Gu Huayu nodded, oh, I forgot you still have a brain. Li Tao turned down his face and said, Gu Xiao, who are you scolding? Gu Huayu said with a smile, I misunderstood, I really didn't mean to scold you with this sentence, I meant to praise you. How come you, can't understand both good and bad words? Tell me, what ideas have you come up with? Li Tao glanced sideways at Huayu and raised his hand to hit Gu Huayu. Gu Huayu raised her hand to block it and said, Li Er, if you dare to take action, why don't you try? Li Tao changed his hand to the cup in front of him, took a sip of tea, and then said, now it seems that that is not a good idea. I just stepped forward to support the old woman and threatened them that if anyone did bad things again, I would be rude to them. Go back and tell your family about this, so that they know they are doing evil outside. They were frightened by your two words. Li Tao shook his head, that's not true, the two elders thought I was nosy and wanted to beat me up. Li Yang stepped forward to protect me. Liang is 6 years older than me and has a lot of skills, so those guys didn't dare to move. Li Yang threatened them, saying that if they attacked me, my father would take them to the prison of the criminal department. The gang dispersed. Gu Huayu asked, that blind old lady is Mrs. Huang, the owner of Sunan Silver House. Li Tao nodded, Yes, the blind mother-in-law is Mrs. Huang. She came out of home that day and wanted to go to the nearby Cheng Huang temple to offer incense. After going out, she remembered that she had left something at home. The servant went back to get it and asked her to wait where she was. Is this how you got acquainted with the Su family? Li Tao shook his head and said, no, after the others dispersed, Liang and I accompanied old Mrs. Huang to wait for the servants from Su Mansion to arrive. We didn't have to wait long before the servants from Su Mansion came back. After a few brief explanations, Li Yang and I left. It was in the autumn of 2 years later that I really got acquainted with the Su family. End of this chapter. The Rebirth of Space, the lucky girl from a farm family. Author, he would fire every. Chapter 330. Chapter 330 Utilization. Li Tao paused for a moment, and then said, I went to Cin Temple with my family to practice monastery. Cin Temple is far away from the city. There are many courtyards on the mountain behind the temple, and our family also has a courtyard on the mountain. That night, I didn't want to go to bed early, so I took Quanzi, Liang, and the others out for a stroll. On an autumn night, the moon was bright and the stars were shining brightly. It was quiet over there at Cin Temple, so the few of us walked far away along the post road unknowingly. It wasn't until we heard the sound of fighting that we realized we were far away from Cin Temple. Under the moonlight, I saw 5 or 6 masked men in black fighting with 2 people. There was another person lying on the ground not far away, and the 2 people who fought with the man in black were also injured and looked like they would fall down at any time. Our appearance disturbed the men in black, who quickly left without fighting. After the man in black left, the 2 people thanked us and then ran towards the man lying on the ground. The person on the ground is Sujins, the owner of Sunan Silver Tower. I thought the 3 of them were pitiful, so I asked someone to carry Mr. Su back to the mountain and hide him secretly in my house. Early the next morning, I found an excuse to go back to the city, put Mr. Su on the carriage, and sent him back to the Su Mansion. After arriving at the Su Mansion, the servants of the Su Mansion recognized Li Yang and me, and realized that we were the ones who helped old Mrs. Huang rescue the siege 2 years ago. At this point, I have formed a relationship with the Su family. So, you have been associated with the Su family for 10 years. Li Tao corrected him, to be precise, we have known each other for 8 years. Gu Huayu said, 10 years is almost the same as 8 years. There is no need to be so serious. Are the Su family from Yangzhou? Li Tao knew that Gu Huayu had checked and nodded truthfully, yes, Mr. Su's family is from Yangzhou and has been in the capital for more than 20 years. Gu Huayu then asked, apart from old Mrs. Su and old Mrs. Huang, who else is there in the Su family? Li Tao sighed, looked at Gu Huayu and asked, you have already checked it out, so you don't need to ask me again. Gu Huayu changed the question, okay, you don't need to answer this question. Why did Sunan Yinlu end up tearing up Baoking Yinlu? Li Tao looked at Gu Huayu. Gu Huayu said, there's no need to tell me that you don't know. From Li Tao's words, Gu Huayu has determined that Li Tao and the Su family are special. The Su family's ability to learn about her dispute with Wang Piyun so quickly must be due to Li Tao's contribution. Xiao, can you not ask about this? Gu Huayu played with the teacup in her hand, and then said, what happened yesterday happened because of me. At first, I just wanted to poke at Miss Wang San's spirit and give Mrs. Shangguan some color. Sunan Yinlu took the lead to tear up Baoking Yinlu, and then Hankei Yinlu followed suit, and then other silver houses followed suit, raising the issue again and again. Now, all forces are coming to an end one after another, and I am the trigger of this incident. It is necessary for me to understand this matter. Li Tao looked up at Gu Huayu and asked, are you afraid of the Prime Minister's mansion? Gu Huayu shook her head, I am not afraid of any prince or Prime Minister's palace, nor any force. I just want to find out the ins and outs of the matter and understand what role I played in this power struggle. Li Tao said, you can just watch them compete with each other, there is no need to get involved. You can say it easily. This happened because of me, how can I ignore it? Gu Huayu asked in return. Li Tao fell silent. When Gu Huayu saw it, she took out another jade pendant from her purse and put it on the table. You said, if I encounter trouble, take this token to help, and someone will help me. This token is a token of the Xing Jiao Gang. Is it related to the Su family? Li Tao raised his head and looked at Gu Huayu in surprise. He never said anything about Mr. Su, nor about the Xingji Gang. How did she know? Gu Huayu knew from Li Tao's surprised eyes that she had guessed correctly. So, Gu Huayu brought the topic back. What happened yesterday? The Su family was the first to go. I will investigate the Su family. You should think that it is not just me who is checking the Su family, but also the King of Qi, the King Xian, and the Prime Minister's office are also checking the Su family. I can find out that you are connected to the Su family, and I can also find out about other companies. Have you ever thought about how to face them? Li Tao was stunned for a moment. After a moment, he said, we'll wait until they find out. Gu Huayu said, we can be considered good friends, so I came to you to find out what happened. Since you can't say more, just pretend I didn't ask. I will check it myself. Whatever I want to know, sooner or later, I will definitely find out the result. Gu Huayu pushed the token on the table towards Li Tao. You put this away. It's getting late, I should go back. After saying that, Gu Huayu stood up and prepared to leave. Li Tao did not pick up the token on the table, but looked at Gu Huayu with a bit of panic. He had a feeling that if he allowed Gu Huayu to leave like this today, a barrier would be erected between him and her. Not what he wanted. With these thoughts in mind, Li Tao quickly stood up and took a step forward to block Gu Huayu's path. Xiao, sit down and I'll talk to you. Gu Huayu didn't mean to force him, she just didn't want to embarrass him. You. Li Tao was afraid that Gu Huayu would say no, so he said, if you still think of me as a friend, then sit down. Gu Huayu took a deep look at Li Tao and sat down again. Li Tao saw Gu Huayu sit down and he breathed a sigh of relief and said, Sunan Silver Tower is tearing Baoking Silver Tower apart. It's not just a competition between merchants, but... At this point, Li Tao stopped. Gu Huayu asked, but what? Li Tao hesitated for a moment and said, seeking revenge. Seeking revenge? After hearing this, Gu Huayu's nerves immediately tensed up and she asked, does the Su family have a grudge against the Prime Minister Wang's mansion? The two families, one is a merchant's family and the other is an official's family, should not have any contact with each other. How come they have become enemies? What kind of hatred? Li Tao nodded, this is a blood feud where human life is at stake. Gu Huayu suddenly thought of something and blurted out, is the death of the Su family's daughter related to the Wang Xiang feud? Li Tao looked at Gu Huayu in astonishment, you know. Gu Huayu said, I know a little, but not much. Please tell me carefully. Li Tao picked up the teacup and wanted to drink tea, but found that the water in the cup had already been drained. Gu Huayu looked at it, reached for the teapot, poured tea for Li Tao, and asked, Mr. Su has stayed in the capital all these years just to avenge his daughter. Li Tao took the tea handed over by Gu Huayu and took a sip. Yes, Mr. Su has been waiting for many years just to seek revenge for his daughter. Gu Huayu asked, how did the Su family become enmity with the Wang Xiang feud? Moreover, how did the Su family's daughter die? Li Tao said, it makes sense that the Su family is from Yangzhou, and their ancestors have lived in Yangzhou for generations. The ancestors of the Su family were craftsmen with outstanding skills in making hairpin jewelry. The headdresses of the Su family in Yangzhou have long been famous in the Jiangnan area. More than 20 years ago, Wang Haoj, the eldest son of Prime Minister Wang, became a Jinchi and later served as a county magistrate in Yangzhou. He met Mr. Su's daughter Su Xian. The two are in love with each other and are in love with each other. The prime minister at that time was serving as a minister in the Ministry of Personnel. After learning about this incident, he transferred Wang Haoj back to the capital. Before Wang Haoj returned to Beijing, he made an agreement with Su Xian that after returning to Beijing to inform the elders at home, he would invite a matchmaker to come to propose marriage. Su Xian asked Mr. Su to go to Beijing before waiting for Wang Haoj's letter in Yangzhou. The Su family is very small. Mr. Su only has one daughter, Su Xian. He always follows his daughter's instructions in everything. If his daughter wants to come to the capital, Mr. Su will discuss with his wife to bring the business to the capital. In this way, Mr. Su took his wife and daughter to the capital and opened Sunan Silver Tower. After the Su family arrived in the capital, Su Xian went to the Wang family to find Wang Haoj, only to find out that the Wang family had already negotiated a marriage with the Kui family. It was also because Su Xian went to look for Wang Haoj, and the old woman in Shangguan knew that Su Xian had arrived in the capital. The old lady from Shangguan was afraid that the Kui family would know about her son's past, so she took advantage of Su Xian. After listening to Li Tao's story, Gu Huayu thought of Aunt Lu's words again, and was convinced that Su Xian died unexpectedly. Li Tao said apologetically, "I'm sorry, I asked Mr. Su to make things difficult for you without consulting you about what happened yesterday." Gu Huayu's thoughts still lingered on Su Xian's death, and she waved her hand towards Li Tao. "No need to apologize, Mr. Su's family is so pitiful." "How did Su Xian die?" Li Tao said, "According to Mr. Su, he was strangled to death first and then hung on the roof beam. There were strangulation marks on Su Xian's neck. He must have struggled desperately when he died. The nail on his right index finger was broken and the shoe on his left foot was also kicked off. What's funny is that the Su family reported it to the official, and the official came to see it. After a few days of delay, they said that Su Xian had committed suicide and refuted the Su family's petition and dismissed the case. It's unreasonable, why don't you file a complaint?" Li Tao looked at Gu Huayu as if he were an idiot and said, "Complain? Princess, do you think everyone is like you, holding a fish charm given by the emperor, and can enter the palace freely? The Su family is just a family of merchants, or a family of merchants who have just arrived in Beijing. They are unfamiliar with the place in the capital, where do you want them to go to complain? Furthermore, Su Xian died in the scorching dog days of summer. If you are knowledgeable about medicine, you will naturally know that the body cannot be preserved in the dog days of summer. Even if you can file a complaint, it is impossible to determine whether the person committed suicide or committed suicide. Injustice in the world will exist wherever there are people." Gu Hua's tone was so tight that she couldn't say a word. After a long time, Gu Huayu calmed down and asked, "Who was the governor of Jingzhou Mansion when this happened?" Li Tao said, "I checked and found that the governor's surname at that time was Lu and his name was Lu Ruiai. The year after Su Xian's death, the emperor found out that Lu Ruiai was a member of Prince Duan and had participated in the palace coup. Lu Ruiai was sent to Tianlao because of this, and the Lu family was subsequently executed by the 9 tribes." Gu Huashi looked at Li Tao solemnly, "Is Lu Ruiai a member of Prince Duan?" Li Tao nodded, "Yes, I went to Dali Temple to check the Lu family's files." Gu Huayu nodded slightly and murmured, "Judging from this case, Wang Xiangfu has a close relationship with Lu Ruiai. Doesn't the Wang Xiang also have a relationship with Prince Duan?" Li Tao understood what Gu Huayu meant and said, "I have also thought about this. Prince Duan is dead and the Lu family has been executed. Even if the king has contacts with them, we can't find any evidence. Indeed, even if Wang Xiang participated in the palace coup that year, more than 20 years later, the evidence had been destroyed by him, so how could it be retained? Otherwise, he would not be able to sit as prime minister." Gu Huayu asked, Have you found any clues about the Prime Minister's mansion in the past few years? Li Tao shook his head and said distressedly, except for the Su family, nothing else has been found. Moreover, there is no evidence for the Su family. When the incident happened, was there no maid or woman around Su Xian? Li Tao replied, old Mrs. Huang said that when the incident happened, the maid serving Su Xian fell asleep outside and did not wake up until the next morning. Gu Huayu nodded clearly, yes, the other party is planning to commit murder, so they must have made sufficient preparations. What are you going to do next? Li Tao shook his head, I was detained by my father after I returned to the house yesterday, and I haven't seen Mr. Su yet. Do you have any good ideas? Gu Huayu thought for a while and said, while everyone is investigating the Sunan Silver House, Mr. Su can consider letting the matter out about Su Xian's relationship with Wang Haoj, and by the way, tell the truth about Su Xian's death and what happened to the Jingzhou mansion after reporting it to the official. The good deeds are also spread out. I remember that during the course of the story, the Su family came to the capital. It can be said that Wang Haoj asked them to come. Furthermore, the tragic death of Su Xian is the key point. This is enough to prove that Su Xian did not commit suicide, and the neighbors at the time can testify. Also, the inaction of officials in Jingzhou mansion is also a key point. If Mr. Su really wants to avenge his daughter, he should make good use of Lu Ruiai. Li Tao said, everyone is dead, how can we use them? Gu Huayu said, dead people are easy to make use of. Li Tao looked at Gu Huayu and asked, how to use it? Gu Huayu rolled her eyes at him and said, you're so stupid. Can a dead person argue? No way. To say something, Mr. Su doesn't just have to open his mouth, he only needs to say a precise phrase. Remember, don't tell the truth or be ambiguous. Just let people think of Wang Xiang and Lu Ruiai in the same place. These letters were circulated, and many people searched for the king's identity. Li Tao looked at Gu Huayu with bright eyes and was so excited that he tapped the table twice. Yes, Gu Xiao, why are you so smart? I'll tell Mr. Su right now. Li Tao stood up and prepared to walk out. Gu Huayu hurriedly shouted, stop. Li Tao turned to look at Gu Huayu, what's wrong? Gu Huayu reminded, everyone is staring at Mr. Su now. In this limelight, you'd better meet Mr. Su less often, so as not to cause trouble to Mr. Su. What should we do? Gu Huayu scolded, I say you are stupid, but you are really stupid. Write a letter and let someone forward it. Li Tao patted his head twice and said with a smile, I'm so excited. Gu Huayu stood up and said, it's getting late, I'm going back too. Okay, let's go together. It was already dark when Gu Huayu came out of the tea house. A gust of cold wind blew, and the cold air hit her face. Gu Huayu couldn't help shivering and wrapped her cloak around her. King Yu drove the car over, and Gu Huayu bent down and got on the car. Li Tao stood beside the car and said, Xiao, please go slower on the road. Let's meet for the first time. Gu Huayu lifted the curtains and warned, tell Mr. Su to be careful. Li Tao nodded, okay. Don't worry, I will make arrangements. Gu Huayu nodded, okay, King Yu, let's go back. Qing Yu cupped his hands towards Li Dogong and hurried back to Wutong Lane. When the car arrived at the intersection of Wutong Lane, Qing Yu saw Yuan, whom he had not seen for a long time. He turned around and said, Princess, I saw Yuan next to the prince. End of this chapter.